Chapter 1266. F*CKU. If not for the millennia of loneliness and coldness that had eroded all of Conginus's feelings and emotions, he would have cursed his disloyal teammate. Damn it, I'm a spellcaster. Do you expect me to deal with that unreasonable bone dragon when you're all hiding? Before he could finish cursing in his mind, the crimson soul fire in his eye sockets shook violently. Damn it, that bone dragon is here. The surroundings were still shrouded in thick fog and icicles. Even with Conginus's slender body, it would be difficult for him to move through it. The forest of icicles was still as peaceful as ever. The fog flowed silently, as if nothing had changed. While he couldn't see the bone dragon's body or hear its footsteps, the strange, chilling aura thickened. It was so cold that he couldn't help but shrink his soulfire and shiver. Without hesitation, Conginus raised the strangely shaped, short-handled bone staff in his hand. A grayish-white shockwave of deathly aura engulfed everything within 100-meter radius, corroding everything in its path. The crystalline forest of icicles, in particular, turned black and yellow from the corrosion before crumbling into a pile of black ash. Even the ever-present ice crystal mist was thinned by the impact, vaguely revealing the surrounding scenery. Within the fog, a towering figure shrouded in blue light appeared and charged at Conginus with a roar. With a wave of the white bone staff, a few strange figures appeared and blocked the path of the bone dragon's charge. One of them was the beginner grade 4 hardbone dragon, the other two were also beginner grade 4 retribution knights, and the other was a middle-grade lich. Sensing the vast dragon might pressing down on him like a mountain or a sea, as well as the ferocious aura that could topple mountains and overturn seas, Xiao Chen's heart sank. Had it not been for Conginus's command, the hard-bone dragon would never have gone head-on against the frozen bone dragon. Unfortunately, as a sole slave under the lich, the only thing the hard-bone dragon could do was to sacrifice itself and wipe out all its enemies. Hence, amidst a deafening rumble, the two bone dragons of different attributes and sizes clashed fiercely against each other. In the next moment, a ripple of energy swept out, and all the creatures that did not meet the required size were swept up uncontrollably. They were thrown to the periphery by the violent and ferocious shockwaves. Then, broken dragon bone fragments and powder-like ice shards were blown away in all directions by the raging wind. Amidst a burst of strange popping sounds, the surface of several thick icicles near the battlefield crackled as they were hit by the bone fragments and ice shards. In an instant, many honeycomb-like holes appeared. The lich and lich were sent flying, and only the bone dragon and the two undead knights barely managed to stay on the battlefield. Huge blue ice shards and powder rolled up, once again overturning the ferocious battlefield. The turbid air and the overflowing violent energy stirred up the space. Any mental strength that entered the battlefield was crushed, and it was difficult to see what was going on inside. A hard bone dragon and two retribution knights were fighting against the frozen bone dragon. Although both sides were at grade 4, the huge difference in strength was not something that could be easily overcome by numbers. After a moment, the battlefield suddenly fell silent. A huge bone dragon's skull was thrown out, and it skidded on the cracked ice ground for 100 meters before coming to a stop. Through its empty eye sockets, one could see that the bone dragon's soul fire had been extinguished. It was clearly dead. As for the two retribution knights, they remained in the ice crystal fog and did not show themselves. However, considering the difference in strength between both sides, it was easy to imagine what would happen to them. Conginus, who had flown 1,000 meters away, roared in exasperation, "Sand King, I know you have recovered. Immediately, block this fellow for me right now. Otherwise, our deal will be nullified." The lich could not help but feel exasperated. While a grade 4 hard bone dragon was not a top-tier war pet, it was still one of the top elite slaves under Conginus. Now, it had been sacrificed on the battlefield for no reason, and two retribution knights had been sacrificed. Even the lich, who had lived for thousands of years, felt the pain of such a huge loss. These Grade 4 undead slaves weren't low-level undead that could be recruited in droves from the skeletal plane. Many elite Grade 4 slaves were actually created by the Lich with his superb necromancy skills and alchemy, using expensive magical materials and gems. Losing one was enough to break his heart, and losing 3 in one go was even more painful than having a dagger plunged into his heart. However, no matter how many or how expensive the slaves were, they were not as important as his own life. That was why the Lich did not hesitate to abandon them when it came to a moment of life and death. As if sensing the Lich's rage, the Sand King's strange insect body burrowed out of the ground and wriggled its fat butt in front of Congenus once more. With the protection of the meat shield, Congenus was finally able to relax. He floated to the ground and quickly dictated a spell with the help of the Grade 4 Lich, preparing to unleash an ultimate necromancy spell. Energy surged within the ice crystal fog, and dragon roars could be heard. The frozen bone dragon Nax seemed to be fighting with the Lamia Sheena again. The battle was intense. In an instant, flames burst out from the depths of the fog. Grim took the opportunity to sneak up and tossed a molten core fireball at Nax's abdomen. Ice and fire intertwined. Ice-type spells were a branch of water-type spells, and they had the same effect as fire-type spells. Thus, even Nax found it difficult to endure the terrifying pain that penetrated his soul as he was roasted by the ferocious flames. Another shrill dragon roar that tore through the clouds rang out, followed by clouds of blue mist chasing after a flaming figure, smashing a wide path through the forest of ice clusters in the hall. Just as the ice and fire burned, a huge psionic formation appeared on the ground where the blue fog was the thickest. Immediately after, countless beams of psionic energy converged and coated Nax's huge and imposing body with a layer of strange light. The next moment, psionic energy exploded. A portion of the power of ice within Nax's body was disrupted and turned into chaotic energy, causing it to instantly lose control of a portion of its dragon body. Bastards! You damned bastards! I will! Before the frozen bone dragon could finish its roar, it was interrupted by another wave of attacks. The entire hall instantly turned into a slaughterhouse of blood and flesh. Large amounts of ice energy seeped out of Nax's body, polluting the surrounding space to the point where it was extremely filthy. Taking advantage of his teammates holding back his opponent, Congenus and the necromancer's dark blood rain fell from the sky and covered the entire goddess of ice. The gloomy sky darkened once more. Thick black clouds rose from the ground and quickly covered the entire battlefield. As the light dimmed to a point where it was hard to see, a putrid stench of rain fell from the sky. Amidst the disgusting stench, the rainwater splashed as it fell on the ground. It wasn't normal rain, but rotten blood. Under the baptism of the evil blood rain, the ice crystal fog was corroded, revealing the horrifying high-level battlefield below. The ice crystals quickly melted under the blood rain, giving the two combatants more space to maneuver. The battle had only lasted a few minutes, but Serpentina was already heavily injured. She gritted her teeth and retreated from the battlefield. Her once beautiful upper body was now purple and blue, and one could see the light blue frost marks left by the invasion of the frigid air everywhere. A lot of flesh and blood couldn't withstand the corrosion of the power of extreme coldness and exploded into fine ice shards, leaving behind large and small bloody holes on the ground. Fortunately, the temperature in the hall was extremely low. The wounds on her body were frozen by the frost energy, so she didn't lose too much blood. Otherwise, Sakina's combat power would be reduced by more than 30% due to the blood loss from the holes that were densely packed like honeycombs. Half of her wriggling snake hair had already frozen to death. The ice crystal snakes were rapidly eroding and exploding into ice shards that filled the sky. As for the long snake tail behind him, it was now cut in half. Although the remaining tail was covered in fine scales, it was still cut by the sharp ice blades and snow swords. She slithered on the ground with such a snake tail. Every step she took caused her snake hair to stretch and her teeth to clench. As for the Sand King, who was the main force in the battle, he was also in a miserable state. The thick insect armor covering the surface of his body was already full of cracks. Every time he collided with the frost-bone dragon, stinky and filthy insect blood would spurt out from the cracks, dyeing the ground with dark spots. One of the Sand King's giant pincers was bitten off, and the scorpion tail behind him was broken as well. It hung on the flesh and scales, barely hanging on. In comparison, Grim and Toras, who were spellcasters, were in a much better situation. The two of them roamed around the periphery of the battlefield. When they saw an opportunity, they would flash over and attack like a storm. Once they found out that the Frost-Bone Dragon had the intention to focus fire on them, they would turn around and run without hesitation. As for the dignity and glory of a Grade 4 powerhouse, those things were better left for the martyrs to enjoy. There was a dark rain of blood above, a rotten land below, and a few Grade 4 powerhouses in the middle. Although the battle was still in a stalemate, from the overall situation, it was obvious that Grim and the invaders had the upper hand. Even if the Frost-Bone Dragon Nax had outstanding combat ability, it couldn't withstand such a terrifying pressure when 5 powerful evil beings gathered together. Chapter 1267. The frozen skeletal dragon was indeed very powerful. However, with its current strength, it was still not strong enough to contend against a party of 5 Type 4 powerhouses with their own strength. The reason why the battle was so intense was because the experts were preoccupied with their own matters. They held back and could not work together to bring out their strength. In all fairness, in terms of individual strength, Lich Congenas, Astral Soul Turas, and Grim were not any weaker than the frozen skeletal dragon. However, this was just an interesting hunt for them. They would reap great rewards if they succeeded, but if they failed, they would return to their lair to lick their wounds and fight again. Hence, they would subconsciously avoid opportunities that required them to pay a certain price in order to deal great damage to the old dragon. After all, this was an unfamiliar team that had been put together at the last minute and was suppressed by the will of the world of ice. Furthermore, none of them were willing to risk their lives to fight the old dragon, which was why the battle was dragged on for so long. However, the strength of the team was there for all to see. No matter how much the old dragon struggled and fought, it could not escape the fate of defeat. However, what Grim found most strange was that no matter how intense the battle was, or how bad the situation was, the frozen skeletal dragon did not leave the goddess of ice shrine. It kept its feet on the ground and continued to fight against the expert. He could not help but feel suspicious. Sand King, you don't have to fight anymore. Go to the center of this icy mountain and see if there's anything strange there. Grim leaped and dodged the frozen skeletal dragon's ferocious pounce and tail swipe as he yelled, "I suspect that the winter chest is not on the old dragon," but Grim did not use mental telepathy to say this, but shouted it out loud. Hearing that, not only were the members of the expert team stunned, even the old dragon shuddered. The soul fire in its empty eye sockets could not help but tremble. As expected, something was wrong. Through the old dragon's reaction, the members of the expert team immediately understood. No wonder the goddess of ice shrine had such a strange and cold aura. This aura did not originate from the frozen skeletal dragon, but from the ancient winter chest buried deep within the icy mountain. Although the ancient winter box possessed the powerful ice law, it also possessed the death law that ordinary people would find difficult to approach. If one were to look into its origin, the ancient winter chest was actually not suitable to be Naxx's origin saint artifact. In order to advance to Tier 5, Naxx did not hesitate to damage his own body to absorb the law of ice within the ancient winter chest. This caused the power of ice in its body to become even stronger. However, the law of death that came with it also transformed its body into something neither human nor ghost, turning it into an undead bone dragon that people despised and despised. Although the overly intense soul modification had greatly increased its strength, it had also firmly bound it to this place. Before completing the final modification of its soul, it could not take a single step out of the ice god hall, nor could it soar above the blue skies like ordinary dragons. As for why he didn't bring the ancient winter box with him, the reason was very simple. It simply couldn't withstand the powerful and terrifying nomological power within. Evolving from a nomological law to a nomological law was not as simple as changing the word. The laws were the basic rules that the plane system followed, and they were usually just a small branch of some grand law power. Just like the law of fire, it was an abnormally large and complete system of power. And the law of fire that Grimm had grasped was only a small tentacle of this enormous power of law. Only when there was enough law power gathered together would it be possible for Grimm to pry into the mysteries of the operation of the law system through the law power he grasped. As for grasping a complete law power, this was not something that a low-level life form could accept or bear. Tier 4. In the plane, he could be called a god, and was also given the title of demigod. However, in essence, he was still just a mortal body. From his body to his soul, he was made up of all sorts of substances from the plane. Since he couldn't break free from the restraints of the plane's consciousness, he naturally couldn't transcend the plane's consciousness and act on behalf of the plane's laws. All the law power within the plane was controlled by the plane's consciousness, and it definitely wouldn't hand over its authority to outsiders. Even those that could come into contact with the power of the plane's laws would suffer the backlash of the plane's consciousness if they weren't honest enough. That was why an ancient treasure that contained the power of 2 different laws was far more meaningful to the frozen skeletal dragon Nax and the Lich Con genus than anyone could imagine. Seeing that Grimm had discovered the winter box's location, the frozen skeletal dragon Nax was infuriated and terrified. He didn't even need to blow the horn for the final battle. With a simple sentence, Grimm had forced the old dragon to fight to the death. If Con genus wanted to get the winter box, he wouldn't be able to do so if he cowered. If the old dragon decided to fight to the death and forced his companions to retreat, Con genus wouldn't be able to withstand the ferocious attacks and the terrifying cold in a one-on-one fight. Therefore, without any explanation, the battle instantly became white-hot. The old dragon no longer cared about the damage the cold could inflict on his body. He began to absorb the terrifying power of laws within the winter box and madly turned it into a blizzard that engulfed every inch of the goddess of ice. At this moment in the battle, the real battle between the 2 sides had begun. In such a harsh environment, the powerhouses could no longer gather their strength. They could only fight on their own and wait for the old dragon's backlash to arrive. Whether the old dragon would use his explosive power to cripple them or wipe them out, or they would endure until the old dragon ran out of energy and suffered the backlash of the winter box would depend on the strength of both sides. The goddess of ice could no longer see or sense anything. Everyone's spiritual senses were suppressed to a certain limit by the bone-chilling power of the winter box. Even with their 4th-order senses, they couldn't extend their spiritual tentacles beyond 50 meters from their bodies. Such a narrow field of vision had obviously forced them to the edge of a dangerous cliff. If they were not careful, they would end up dead and their souls destroyed. But no matter how dangerous it was, none of the party members chose to leave the goddess of ice. They simply didn't want to lose the chance to obtain the ancient winter box. Even though the ancient winter box didn't seem to be compatible with their souls, and they had already promised Con genus to help him obtain the dual attribute divine weapon, the chance was right in front of them. Everyone had a good chance of fighting for it in the midst of a chaotic battle. Who would give up on such a rare opportunity? At the very least, Grimm couldn't let it go. At a time like this, everyone only cared about themselves. Who cared about the life and death of others? Grimm held the Book of Darkness in his left hand and the flaming coral staff in his right. His entire body was enveloped in a blazing red domain. Shadowfiend was faintly discernible beneath him, constantly on guard against his surroundings. Grimm walked forward without hesitation. His tight black leather suit made his figure look even taller and more imposing. His lips were tightly pursed and his gaze was cold. The skin on his smooth forehead split open to reveal a strange diamond-shaped crystal. Under the control of the focusing crystal, Grimm's spiritual force was highly concentrated. Large amounts of fire energy surged out from the Vulcan orb and the Heart of Rule, gathering around him. Once he sensed the enemy's presence, Grimm's earth-shattering attack would definitely leave him with an unforgettable memory. As for whether he would hurt his teammates, at this point, there was no such thing as teammates. Anyone who dared to get close to him was someone with ulterior motive. Grimm wouldn't hesitate or go easy on them. A violent shockwave rippled 375 meters to his left. Grimm could sense the auras of the old dragon and the Sand King from the shockwave. The Sand King's hoarse cries of pain could be heard clearly in the murky, frigid fog. Judging from the level of power unleashed by both sides, the Sand King, who had taken quite a bit of damage in the previous battle, would probably be forced out of the competition by the old dragon. As expected, with a heart-wrenching roar, the Sand King's unique power and aura fled into the distance, charging out of the divine hall of ice. The Sand King had left. Grimm searched for the platform in the fog while trying to figure out who the old dragon's next target would be. The Lamia, Celeste, or himself. Kongness was a terrifying lich renowned throughout the world. If this was all he had, he wouldn't have lived up to his reputation. So, he must have hidden a portion of his combat power. Under such circumstances, if the old dragon didn't want the others to benefit from the fight, the best choice would be to get rid of the others first. If that was the case, the old dragon wouldn't choose the weakest Lamia, but before Grimm could finish his thoughts, the fog in the distance parted and the old dragon, riddled with wounds, charged at him with a roar. First, Frost Breath opened a path, and a dazzling blue dragon breath surged towards Grimm in an earth-shattering manner. The range was so large and the temperature was so low that it was beyond what Grimm could sense. Chapter 1268. Beat. Warning, warning. High energy and low temperature particles are approaching. Estimated low temperature energy damage in the core region is over 7,900 degrees, with a radius of 216 meters. Please evade immediately. Beep. Detected the existence of a strange law of ice. Effects unknown. Recommended for host to leave this area immediately. Chaotic physique activated, absorbing and converting 783 degrees of low temperature damage. Bloodline innate ability. Energy black hole activated, diverting and nullifying 1,695 degrees of low temperature damage. Fire law activated, negating 3,742 degrees of low temperature damage. Fire protection force field activated, negating 630 degrees of low temperature damage. Elemental resistance raised to the limit, negating 561 degrees of low temperature damage. Host will suffer around 489 degrees of low temperature damage with a series of AI chip prompts. A large amount of cold air swept over, instantly enveloping Grimm and everything around him in a blue fog. The cold air rolled over, colliding with Grimm's fire defense and elemental force field. In an instant, the magic shield that was surrounded by flames froze into ice crystals. Even the ice beneath Grimm's feet could not withstand the terrifying low temperature. A layer of azure frost formed at a speed visible to the naked eye, and it quickly shattered. Even the Shade Lord hiding in the shadow space was affected by the law of ice. Its entire metallic body was covered in a layer of ice, showing signs of being frozen. Grimm's robe, which was still fluttering violently a moment ago, turned as cold as steel in the next moment. Azure frost rapidly extended along the edge of his robe, trying to freeze his entire body on the spot. Not far away, the indomitable ice-bone dragon was still roaring as it charged over. Once Grimm was frozen in the ice, he would probably be smashed to the ground by the old dragon before he could break free, and then crushed into a pulp. Compared to draconic magic, dragons preferred to use the most direct and violent method to end a battle. Shadelord, go! Almost as soon as they met face to face, the ferocious old dragon almost forced Grim into a dead end. Therefore, Grim did not dare to slack off. While loudly issuing orders to the shadow fiends, he flipped through the pages of the Book of Darkness in his hand and released one ugly servant corpse after another filled with vicious plague. These servant corpses were mostly Grade 1 cannon fodder, and would not be able to display any strength in a Grade 4 battlefield. The moment they were summoned in front of Grim, they were blown away by the frigid aura, instantly turning into strangely shaped ice sculptures. However, when the old dragon charged over like a bulldozer, the ice sculptures exploded one after the other. Large amounts of yellow-green smoke were released from within, causing dark spots to appear on Nax's pure blue body. Plague poison. Damn it, this is plague poison. You bastard, how dare you release plague poison in my chamber? I'm going to kill you. Furious, Nax lunged forward and bit at the retreating Grim with his big blue mouth. At this moment, Grim no longer held back. The Book of Darkness shone with a green light, and Grim was instantly buffed by the toxic aura. The focusing crystal on his forehead shone like a star, and his spiritual force surged into the flaming coral staff in his right hand. The disguised divine fire bead at the tip of the staff glowed with brilliance, overflowing with the colorful radiance of a supreme grade item. However, in the next moment, all the radiance dimmed, leaving only the divine fire bead that was getting brighter and brighter. Just like the bright moon hanging high in the sky, the appearance of the fire god bead made all the light in the world dim and colorless. The only thing left in the entire space was the sun that was still incessantly burning itself, continuously increasing its heat and light. That's right, the divine fire bead was like a small sun that had fallen to the ground. As its power increased, it also emitted terrifying light and heat. Nax, who was pouncing over, had a look of horror in his azure blue eyes. He could sense that the terrifying sun in the young wizard's hand was definitely a supreme grade treasure that was not inferior to the austere winter chest. What was even more frightening was that the wizard seemed to be able to control the terrifying flame energy in it as he pleased. He could feel a small sun rising in front of him, and he was getting closer and closer like a moth flying into a flame. Nax let out a loud dragon roar in horror. He extended his two enormous azure dragon wings to their limits and beat the air with all his might, barely managing to stop himself from pouncing forward. All of his front and rear dragon claws sank into the ice crystals beneath his feet, leaving 20 deep ravines on the ground. However, just as its momentum came to a screeching halt, Grim's attack was already at its peak. He clasped his hands together, and an incomparably violent flame energy shot out from the divine fire bead, forming a meter-thick beam of light that struck the frost-bone dragon's huge body. The moment the beam of light touched his body, Nax felt as if he had been thrown into a terrifying furnace of flames. Every part of his body began to burn from the inside out, from top to bottom. What was even more terrifying was that even the ice energy surging in his body seemed to have been ignited by this pillar of light and started to burn. Nax raised his long neck and let out an extremely painful roar. What gushed out from his huge mouth, nose, eyes, and ears was no longer the blue power of cold. Instead, it was a blazing scarlet flame that surged out. It was just a single strike, yet Nax's soul was damaged to the point of origin. After that, he turned around and charged back into the mist like an extremely miserable defeated dog. In the depths of the mist, Lich Kongnus was rapidly approaching the platform. He was surrounded by all sorts of strange undead creatures. It was thanks to their rampage that he managed to find the rough location of the platform. However, just as he was about to sneak over, he suddenly stopped and turned back to look at the depths of the mist. There, a terrifying aura of energy rose 1,000 meters away, instantly suppressing the pervasive frost energy. Sensing the strands of extreme heat and the terrifying burning intent, Kongnus couldn't help but feel uneasy despite his calm and cold demeanor. While he was quite a distance away, and was isolated by the chaotic frost energy, it didn't stop Kongness from identifying the source of the energy. Grim. It was the human magus who called himself Fireman Grim. Since when did he become so powerful? He remembered the last time he fought with him in the Morian Plain. He had a 70% chance of killing him. It was precisely because of this confidence that the demon Lich dared to invite the other party to encircle the old dragon. But now, just based on the level of the energy aura leaking out, the Lich probably had no chance of winning. Kongness couldn't help but wonder if his plan would work now that such a powerful being had infiltrated their rank. Kongness didn't know that the moment he sensed Grim's outburst, Taurus had already snuck onto the platform and was searching for the ancient winter chest with all his might. The moment Grim's aura erupted, Taurus, who was deciphering the runes on the platform, raised his head and looked in the direction of the battlefield. Such power, Taurus muttered. Even if he's not a powerful being, he's not far from it. Did that human magus use some explosive tool, or is he just relying on his own strength? No matter what, I'll have to be careful around him. Due to his unique energy system, Taurus wasn't afraid of opponents of the same rank. But out of respect for a powerful being, he didn't want to get himself into trouble. Powerful beings. Even in the eyes of Celestials, they were a terrifying bunch. Forget it, I'll let them fight amongst themselves. I'll think of a way to get the ancient winter chest first. The thought of a transcendent item falling into my hands made Taurus's heart burn with passion. However, just as the two experts each had their own thoughts, the Lamia Sheena, who was hiding in a corner of the ice shrine, was madly cursing and ridiculing in her heart. Bastard, bastard, bastard! Kongness, where did you find this god of plague? I had thought that the frost bone dragon was already powerful enough, but now it seemed that the real monster was hiding right beside me. Bastard, the battle here has already surpassed the limits of my abilities. No, I can't stay here any longer. I'll become a stepping stone for those bastards. As she cursed, the Lamia dashed towards the edge of the mist like a bolt of lightning. The battle here had escalated to a new level. It was no longer something a small character like her could participate in. If she stubbornly insisted on staying, she would become an unstable factor that the true competitors would want to eliminate. It couldn't be helped. Only the strongest in the party had the right to obtain the powerful treasures. The second and third ranked fellows would try their best to fight for it, while a marginal character like her would be lucky to get the leftovers. However, the human wizard that she had always looked down on turned out to be the biggest boss in the team. This was beyond her expectations. Thinking of her sarcastic words towards him along the way, Sakina felt a little apprehensive, and couldn't help but secretly curse herself for being as blind as a bat. Bastard, bastard, you're all a bunch of bastards. You're so strong, yet you pretend to be a noob. Humph, I curse you to never walk out of this goddess of ice. Chapter 1269. The Goddess of Ice on the Mysterious Platform. Turaz was still diligently studying the various mysterious and bizarre patterns carved on it, but he had no choice but to stop halfway through his work. It couldn't be helped, the old dragon had returned. The anticipated battle between Fireman and the old dragon did not happen, or rather, it happened too quickly, so Turaz was blocked by the old dragon on the platform before he could find the real entrance. Seeing the frozen bone dragon Nax break through the fog and reappear in front of him, Turaz felt a little sad. This old dragon was simply too pitiful. After forcefully transforming from a frost dragon to a frost bone dragon, the scales and flesh on Nax's body had already disappeared without a trace. All that was left were jagged bones that were harder than fine steel and the gigantic bone spurs that looked like flagpoles. And in between the greenish-gray dragon bones, periosteum, and bone cracks, there was a dazzling blue icy aura. The azure power of frost filled the bone dragon's chest, abdomen, and skull. It even condensed into strange ice flower runes on the surface of its body. A layer of transparent blue ice crystals enveloped every inch of the bone dragon's bones. If one wanted to attack the bone dragon's body, they would first need to break through the ice force field outside its body, and then break through the layer of ice crystal protection. Only by breaking through these two basic layers of defense would it be possible to extend the attack to the bone dragon's body. In this frigid divine hall, Nax seemed to possess limitless power. He could use the terrifying power of cold in an extravagant manner. This was its lair, and also its home ground. In this goddess of ice, no grade 4 creature could defeat the frozen bone dragon Nax, who had the support of the ancient winter chest. But there were exceptions to everything. The only thing that could defeat a transcendent holy weapon was another transcendent holy weapon. The old dragon did not dare to carry the winter chest with him, and could only absorb the power within it endlessly. Now that he was suddenly faced with Grimm, who had two transcendent holy weapons in his hands, he naturally lost in an instant. Terrifying golden flames exploded on the old dragon's body. No matter how the old dragon beat and gathered cold air, he could not get rid of them. The golden flames and the blue cold air collided in a frenzy within its body, almost causing all the energy within the old dragon's body to go berserk. The once elegant, arrogant, holy, and mighty frost bone dragon Nax was now covered in flames on one side and ice on the other. Using its body as the battlefield, its energy and life force as fuel, the two strange powers of the law frantically fought against each other. And every time they collided with each other, the amount of vitality that Nax was most reluctant to part with, the frost skeletal dragon Nax was almost unable to see anything due to the scorching flames. It staggered all the way back to the mysterious platform. Right now, it urgently needed the help of the ancient winter Bach. Only the pure and abundant power of the harsh winter could extinguish the stubborn flames on his dragon body. However, when it rushed back to the high platform, it immediately saw the evil star spirit that was trying to break the glyph formation. Narx almost went crazy. Although it was heavily injured by the law of fire, it still had its mighty divine power and peerlessly powerful draconic magic. How could it be afraid of a lowly thief? It opened its mouth, and a strange dragon breath that was intertwined with ice and fire hit the blue starlight. Damn it, how did this old dragon return so quickly? While cursing in its heart, Star Spirit Tura's body flashed with psionic energy and quickly condensed a few psionic shields in front of it, blocking the scorching dragon breath that was sweeping towards it. If it was just the flames and cold air, it would not be a big deal. This kind of shield made of psionic energy could perfectly defend against any elemental magical particles. However, the two powers of the law attached to the dragon breath were the most terrifying. They stuck to the shield along with the scorching flames and the incomparably cold dragon breath. While entangling and fighting with each other, they also frantically destroyed the stability of the psionic energy. The few psionic shields did not last until the end of the dragon breath, and they exploded into brilliant fireworks amidst a series of crisp explosions. In the next moment, the old dragon's charred mouth opened wide, and it smashed through the sky full of fireflies. It fiercely bit towards the blue cloud-like and strangely beautiful body of the star spirit. Damn it, it's actually the power of two elements, and it's such strange ice and fire. Star Spirit Turaz did not even have the time to curse. With a flash, its body moved horizontally by 100 meters, and it avoided the terrifying mouth that was coming down from above. But as soon as its body appeared, the old dragon's scorched tail pierced through the mist and appeared in front of it with a whistling wind. After all, this was Nax's home ground. Not the slightest change in energy or disturbance in the goddess of ice could escape its eyes and ears. Thus, Turaz could not bear to move too far away from the platform, and it flashed a little closer. It immediately suffered 2 consecutive attacks from the old dragon. This time, Star Spirit Turaz could not react in time. The thick and long dragon tail directly crushed a few of the psionic shields that had just appeared, and it whipped at Turaz's strange cloud-like body. There was no sound of bones exploding, nor was there the sound of flesh exploding. The blue ball of light that was formed purely from clouds and mist, along with the starlight nodes within it, were scattered by this terrifying force. The blue ball disappeared in an instant. When it reappeared, it was already 500 meters away in the depths of the mist. After a period of difficult assembling and reassembling, the cluster of stars reformed. However, more than half of the starlight nodes that formed the body of the star spirit had been lost, and the cloud-like psionic energy that formed the periphery of the body had been lost by nearly 30%. Damn it, this is a huge loss. Turaz propped up his body with difficulty and said hatefully, "The psionic circuit has been scattered and reassembled, and I've lost 30% of my psionic energy. With such a huge loss, I'm afraid I won't be able to make up for it in less than 100 years. Damn old dragon, I'll make you pay the price." Cursing under his breath, Turaz adjusted the power of the psionic energy. Soon, countless strange rays of light shot in all directions, and its beautiful and strange body disappeared once more into the mist. After chasing away Turaz, the old dragon Nax rushed back to the platform. As soon as his aura came into contact with the dense rune lines on the platform, a strange rune of light appeared and completely enveloped him. The aura of the old dragon's soul and the rune of light interacted, and after a series of verification and examination, a ball of light finally lit up in the center of the platform. A small opening appeared on the smooth ice crystal slab, and from it, a thick, almost solid, cold air gushed out. As soon as the liquid cold air came into contact with the outside air, it immediately disintegrated into a thick mist that spread in all directions. The old dragon couldn't wait to move its mouth closer to the entrance of the cave and greedily absorbed the power of cold in the liquid form. Strangely enough, as soon as the cold energy entered his body, the golden flames that were burning all over the old dragon's body were instantly extinguished. The blue cold energy once again dominated his entire body, and even the exposed dragon bones that were exposed after the ice crystals broke were covered in a layer of ice crystal armor after the cold air flowed through them. However, along with the cold energy, an abnormally pale aura of death also entered his body. The influx of these auras immediately caused the old dragon's originally vigorous life aura to become dull and decayed. Many of the blue and exquisite dragon bones instantly turned black and yellow, and a putrid aura unique to undead creatures immediately wrapped around Nax's soul. As a once proud and majestic giant dragon, it had always loathed undead creatures. But now, for the sake of greater power, it had no choice but to give up its pride and glory as a dragon, and throw itself into the arms of undead creatures. To Nax, who had always viewed glory as his life, this was undoubtedly a huge blow to his soul. However, at this critical moment of life and death, it could no longer continue to be ignorant. The old dragon Nax suddenly raised its nose and took a whiff. The violent and ferocious cold energy mixed with the sinister and terrifying energy of death frantically washed over its soul, doing its best to transform it into a form suitable for a super-rank sacred tool. If there were no external enemies invading, it could extend this transformation process to several hundred years. This way, the pain that the origin of its soul had to endure would be distributed over a long period of time. But now, it did not have that much time, and could only risk its life to carry out the transformation. This way, the risk of the transformation failing would increase drastically. The old dragon Nax raised its neck, and let out a long and mournful cry of pain. Its body, which had been blue a moment ago, was now rotting and withering at a speed visible to the naked eye. The cold energy and the energy of death intertwined within its body, causing its body to rapidly turn black and brittle, as if it had been brushed with ink. This kind of double transformation, from the physical body to the soul, was not something that ordinary people could endure. Even the old dragon Nax could only desperately howl, using its mournful dragon cries to vent its indescribable and terrifying pain. The mist continued to tremble. Near the high platform, two strange figures slowly walked out, one on the left and one on the right. They looked at the roaring dragon on the high platform, then at each other. Their eyes were filled with unconcealable greed and vigilance against a powerful enemy. "I didn't expect you to hide so deeply." Lich Congus on the left was the first to speak. "It seems that you have completely subdued the Holy Book of Wisdom. Otherwise, you wouldn't have such great power." Its scarlet soul fire glanced at the book-shaped magic tool in Grimm's hand, and its eyes were filled with deep regret. If it had known that the Holy Book of Wisdom was so powerful, it would have taken down this fireman in the Morian plain, even if both sides suffered heavy losses. But it was too late to say anything now. Chapter 1270. I gave you the Book of Wisdom the last time. You won't fight me for the austere winter's chest this time, will you? Congus asked without batting an eyelid. His tone, however, was solemn and even a tinge of fear. It couldn't be helped. The terrifying blow that Fireman had just shown was simply amazing. Even someone as powerful as Old Dragon Nax was beaten to the point of turning around and running away. He ran back here to take the risk to heal his injuries. If it had been a lich instead, he wouldn't have fared any better than the old dragon. That was why Congus's attitude had played a decisive role in the battle against the old dragon. The lich had no choice but to take it seriously. That's a transcendent item we're talking about, and a dual-attributed one at that. You want me to give up on such a prize? Don't you think you should compensate me? Grimm pulled down his hood and revealed his handsome face. His eyes burned with golden flames, the resplendent crystal on his forehead, the thick tome in his left hand, the strange staff in his right, and the fiery force field around his muscular body, with the help of the powerful wizard artifact and the shadow demon hiding beside him. Grimm's powerful and ferocious aura had already enveloped the entire area, even though he did not make a sound. Facts speak louder than words. Only true power could be used as a bargaining chip in negotiations. I can use a small resource plane to trade for it. The profits there are considerable. You'll get at least 2 million magic crystals every year. Congus gritted his teeth and took out his bargaining chip. A small plane. 2 million. Grimm could not help but smile. If your excellency feels that this is comparable to a dual attribute treasure, then I'll give you a small resource plane and this treasure will belong to me. Then I'll give you 3 grade 4 undead servants. I can give you control over their souls. That way you'll have 3 grade 4 helpers you can use. Congus's soulfire trembled as he spoke. A tier 4 undead servant. That wasn't some cabbage that could be found casually. In order to create a tier 4 undead, aside from all sorts of high-tiered magic materials, one also needed to search for powerful and complete souls. Only with all of these, coupled with its superb undead modification skills, would there be a certain chance of producing a so-called high-level undead. Although these undead created through necromancy and alchemy were not as ferocious as wild ones, they were more loyal and reliable. That was why even a lich of Congus's level didn't have more than double digits in the number of grade 4 servants he had after gaining full control of a bone plane. Now that it had thrown out 3 of them in one go, for it, who had always been diligent and thrifty in running its household, it was as if its bones were being cut off and the pain seeped into its bones. If it wasn't for the treasure it was determined to obtain, it would never make such a sacrifice. As if admiring the lich's grief-stricken expression, Grimm finally spoke, "Since you're so unwilling, I'll give up on your resource planes and subordinates." Hearing this, the shaman demon was shocked. The aura around his body immediately rose. You want to go back on your word? I can consider giving this treasure to you, but the condition is, what is it? You have to serve me for 100 years. The scarlet flames in the shaman demon's eye sockets ignited. Even the 2 large rubies on the surface couldn't hide it. You're insulting me. Human magus, we liches have our own pride. Our souls are free and we will never become someone else's servant. If you want to enslave a lich, you can try. It was obvious that Congus was extremely sensitive and stubborn about the matter. He would rather die than comply and fight to the death. I'm not talking about enslaving your soul when I say 100 years. I'm inviting you to become a foreign elder of my family. I promise I won't force you to do anything dangerous for the next 100 years. All you have to do is make a name for yourself in the Crimson House and open a necromancy department in the family academy. You can also recruit and nurture human apprentices. Of course, you'll have to help if the Crimson House runs into any problems. In the next 100 years, not only will I not touch any of your assets or resources, I'll even give you the authority you deserve as an elder and a share of resources. How about it? You can accept these conditions, right? Comnus looked at Grim and couldn't help but ask, Grim, what are you trying to do? I don't believe you'll help me out of the kindness of your heart. As if prepared for the Lich's doubt, Grim calmly said, Comnus, even if you get the ancient Winter's chest, will you be able to fully fuse with it in 100 years? The Lich had obviously considered this question before, so he answered without hesitation, That's impossible. This is a grade 5 dual-aspect divine weapon. Even with my strength, I'll need at least 200 years to fully fuse with it. Then it's settled. Grim chuckled. You won't be able to roam around for the next 100 or 200 years after you get the Winter's chest anyway. Why don't you become an elder in name in my house? You have so many high-order undead under you. You can easily send any one of them to take care of trivial matters like setting up a faction or organizing a school. You can also go into seclusion and do some research. Also, the resources of the Magus world are much better than those of the Lich's union you've joined, right? If you need anything, you can use the Crimson House's channels to gather it. This is the last bit of sincerity I can show you. At this point, the flames around Grim's body suddenly surged, and his entire body instantly turned into a 10-meter-tall flame giant. His muffled warning sounded like rolling thunder, echoing above the god of ice for a long time. As if sensing Grim's threat and sincerity, Comnus's soulfire flickered and he nodded silently. Very well. If that's the case, make your move. I'll help you get the Winter's chest. As soon as he finished speaking, Grim raised his staff without hesitation and took the initiative to attack. He did not attack the old dragon that was crawling on the platform absorbing the divine weapon's power, nor did he attack Comnus who was on full alert. Instead, he attacked the empty fog not far behind him. The fog was faint, and the ice crystal floor was as smooth as a mirror. There were no signs of enemies at all. However, as a crimson pillar of fire descended, the tens of psionic shields suddenly exploded and revealed Celestial's strange misty body. I'll block Celestial for you. I'll give you half an hour to take down that old dragon. If you don't succeed in half an hour, we'll switch opponents. What do you say? Grim said in a low voice. Comnus looked at Celestial, who had suddenly revealed herself and hissed, Deal. After saying that, the two of them did not waste any more words. Each of them brought out their strongest side and aggressively charged towards their enemies. Bastard! Celestial Turaz, who was thrown into disarray by Grim's wild attacks, roared, Fireman, what did that Lich promise you to make you work so hard for him? Tell me, and I'll double the price. I just want you to help me block that Lich. What do you think? Grim's tall man chuckled. He's willing to serve me for 100 years. Can you do that? What? How is that possible? Celestial Turaz quickly dodged and exclaimed, He actually agreed to such a condition? Fine. Fine. I can also serve you for 100 years. 200 years. The Lich's furious roar came from afar. Although he was fiercely attacking the old dragon, a part of his mental strength was still paying attention to the battlefield. 200 years. Even for a grade 4 powerhouse, 200 years was not a short time. Although a Lich could not achieve immortality, it would not be a problem for them to live for thousands of years. Hence, 200 years was really nothing to them. They just had to endure it and it would pass quickly. But for other creatures, 200 years was a long and painful torment. Just as Celestial Turaz opened her mouth, Unsure of what to do, Grimm no longer hesitated. With a wave of his staff, the Book of Darkness instantly emitted a dark green aura that wrapped around Celestial Tura's body. This was the poison aura activated with the help of the Grade 5 Book of Darkness. Although it had not reached the level where he could control the law of poison, it was terrifying enough for Celestial Tura's. Celestial Tura's cloud-like body instantly turned a wretched green, terrifying plague toxins rampaging in his body. Although most of the toxins were quickly killed by the strange psionic energy, the short battle had caused Celestial Tura's to suffer greatly. What was even more terrifying was that the tall man lowered his body and opened his mouth. A powerful golden flame containing the power of law instantly blew on Celestial Tura's body. This time, Celestial Tura's was in deep trouble. For the first time, Grimm, with the help of the divine fire orb, added 4 types of law effects to his flame: flame range increase, flame penetration, flame invisibility, and flame impact. Although ordinary Grade 4 magi could also control many elemental laws, fusing them with elemental attacks would consume a lot of mental strength. Ordinary magi could only withstand 1 type of law at a time, and those who could fuse 2 or 3 types were all elite magi. Someone like Grimm, who could fuse 4 types at once, was also a powerhouse. Chapter 1271. Elements weren't scary, but laws were. High-grade creatures had powerful elemental resistance, allowing them to reach the elementary elemental immunity stage. The flames, frost, and gales of the mundane world could no longer shake their bodies. At most, they could only cause some trouble for them. The only thing they were afraid of were laws, which were applied to the source of power. These were things they could never avoid, let alone be immune to. Hence, when 2 Grade 4 powerhouses decided to fight, the first thing they clashed with was the laws they controlled. Fire and psionic energy. Both were equally powerful, and they were both part of the multiverse's massive power system. Hence, when they clashed, it was a competition of both sides' comprehension and control of the laws, as well as their ability to manipulate the laws. And in this aspect, Grimm had an overwhelming advantage. The psionic energy Taurus possessed was undoubtedly an abnormally powerful energy. Moreover, it was extremely mysterious, and almost no one in the outside world could comprehend or control it. Hence, in terms of offensive power, Taurus was clearly stronger than Grimm. However, in a competition of strength, apart from the competition of strength itself, the support of strength was also a huge factor. The high-grade equipment Taurus wore might not be bad, but compared to Grimm, who had 2 divine weapons, it was still inferior. Grimm had 2 divine weapons, the divine fire orb for offense, and the Book of Darkness for defense. The help they provided him in a battle of laws was incomparable to ordinary equipment. Thus, as soon as the 2's power of laws collided, Astral Spirit Tura's expression changed, and an ominous feeling rose in his heart. Flames vs psionic energy. It was actually the berserk power of fire that held the absolute advantage, forcefully crushing the series of psionic energy runes Taurus shot out, and directly using the law of fire on his cloud-like body. The psionic energy shield shattered, and the psionic energy runes dissipated. The dark and gloomy cloud-like body was ignited by the law of fire, instantly burning up. Not only was the psionic energy that Taurus had been able to freely control unable to protect the core of his consciousness, it was also forcefully converted into fuel by the law of fire that was surging in, igniting the flames and making it impossible to extinguish them easily. On the other hand, most of Taurus' counterattacks were destroyed by the law flames, and the remaining damage was absorbed by the Vulcan bead. Very little damage could penetrate Grimm's defenses. The strange psionic runes entered Grimm's body and forcefully converted part of the fire energy into terrifying chaotic energy. However, Grimm had the Star Beast bloodline, and his constitution could naturally absorb this chaotic energy. If you're so good, why don't you use those 2 divine weapons? Let's fight again. The celestial Taurus was still indignant. After the battle just now, he had a thorough understanding of this strange fireman's trump card. The Sand King and the Lamia's jaws dropped when they heard the Celestial's revelation. They stared at the young magus with shock. They had long heard that the sorcerer's world was a rather powerful civilization, but they still did not expect the people who came from there to be so abnormal. Compared to the old dragon and the goddess of ice, this magus before them was probably the tycoon that should be defeated the most. The Lamia, who was the weakest among them, could not help but show a hint of worry on her pretty face. Her broken snake tail was also wriggling slightly as she quietly distanced herself from the magus. Even the Sand King began to roll his complex green compound eyes, silently sizing up Grim, who did not look particularly outstanding. As the top creatures of the other planes, they could judge whether a target was strong or not by whether it had a strong enough body or soul. They did not care too much about weapons, equipment, or magical items. After all, most of their worlds or planes did not have a powerful and complete power system like the sorcerer's world. They had either gone through thousands of bloody battles to stand out from millions of ordinary beings and evolve to their current state, or they lived in a deformed but rich plane, possessing a strange talent in a certain aspect, but remaining primitive and inferior in other aspects of social life. In fact, most planes were like this. The reason why peak civilizations were strong was not because they were born that way, but because they were nurtured and developed. Many sorcerers of the sorcerer's world ventured out of their planes to explore the endless sea of stars, searching for rare treasures, conquering many planes, and capturing the essence of each plane to gather in the sorcerer's world. It was their selfish actions, akin to ants moving house, that unexpectedly formed the consciousness of the sorcerer's world's plane. The influx of resources and knowledge from the outside world allowed the sorcerer's world's plane's consciousness to continuously grow, which in turn fed back onto the plane's power system. In the kiliacosm of the vast thousand planes, there were very few peak civilizations like the sorcerer's world that had a healthy and complete sorcerer cultivation system, complete alchemy techniques, and huge reserves of resources. Grade 4 powerhouses like the Sand King and the Lamia, who came from different planes, might already be peak existences in their own planes. However, in the sorcerer's world, they were only at the level of a Grade 4 elite sorcerer. Even among the elite sorcerers, the Sand King and the Lamia were not the cream of the crop. They could only be said to be unique. Hence, facing this powerful fire sorcerer from the sorcerer's world, the Sand King and the Lamia could not help but cower. They were no longer as wild and arrogant as when they first met. As for the astral spirit Taurus, although he was confident that he was not weaker than Grim, he was extremely wary of the two origin divine weapons in Grim's hands. To be honest, he had suffered a great loss at Grim's hands because of a moment of carelessness. Hearing Taurus's angry words, Grim almost laughed out loud. He could not help but say leisurely, in the sorcerer's world, equipment is also a part of a powerhouse's strength. In fact, it's even classified as a very important part. We human sorcerers do not have the innately strong bodies of magical beasts, nor do we have the innate abilities unique to your race. Without equipment, how are we going to fight you? Don't tell me you're going to ask that old dragon to chop off its claws, legs, wings, and scales before fighting you? The astral spirit Taurus fell silent. They were all top-notch powerhouses in their own dimensions. Suddenly stepping out of their dimensions and seeing how powerful the powerhouses of other races were, they naturally lost their balance and confidence and became a little hysterical. After a while, the astral spirit Taurus finally asked the question he wanted to know the answer to the most. I've already given you a lot of promises. Why aren't you helping me, but that lich? Because it has influence, and you're alone. Grim smiled faintly. Putting aside the slight difference in personal strength, I'll definitely gain more from helping it in the future than helping you. The astral spirit Taurus fell silent once more. The Sand King, who had been paying attention to the battle in the distance, suddenly exclaimed, "It seems like the victor has been decided." Everyone present raised their heads and began to look into the depths of the mist. Chapter 1272. Lich Kongness had won. This could be heard from the old dragon's cry of despair and indignation before it died. After being surrounded by a few experts and being attacked by Grimm without any warning, the old dragon was defeated. Even though the old dragon was far stronger than a normal grade 4 expert and was already close to the edge of a powerful being, it was still no match for Kongness, who had sacrificed so much and was devoured by the sea of undead released by the Lich. There were so many powerful monsters in the world, but the reason why Liches were so notorious was because of their shameless skeleton sea tactic. Moreover, Liches were adept at toying with souls in the sky. Dying by their hands didn't mean the end of suffering. On the contrary, dying by the hands of Liches was the beginning of a long and painful life. Their souls and bodies would not be wasted and would be used effectively by the Lich, becoming one of his many puppet-like slaves. There was no time limit to their servitude, freedom, and dignity. Dying by the hands of Liches meant that their souls and bodies would fall into eternal darkness. They would suffer in endless pain and despair, living a life where they could neither live nor die. The Liches wouldn't let them go unless they squeezed every last bit of value out of their bodies and souls. Nax, who had willingly turned himself into an undead, was a huge treasure trove for the Lich. Apart from giving the Lich a grade 5 divine weapon, his body and soul were also top-notch materials for forging high-ranked undead creatures. It wasn't hard to imagine that in the near future, Lich Kongness would have another powerful frost-bone dragon under his command. With such a powerful helper, the Lich would instantly become one of the most powerful beings in the world. When that time came, he would fuse with the ancient winter casket and his path to grade 5 would be smooth sailing. As Nax's soul aura disappeared, the goddess of ice started to shake violently. The majestic hall that was supported by the power of the divine weapon started to tremble. Ice shards and shards fell from the stone walls and the dome above. The ice shrouding the hall lost its restraining power and slowly dissipated. Finally, another quarter of an hour passed. The mist parted and Songonus walked out, his clothes in tatters. Even though his body was so broken that it was impossible to look at him directly, and even though his spirit was so weak that it made one's heart race, the Lich's crystal skull was still displaying a delighted expression. It could be imagined that its harvest inside was definitely unimaginable to ordinary people. Just the divine artifact and the bone dragon were enough for it to fill its stomach to the brim and take it home as a takeaway. The overjoyed Lich immediately formed a sharp contrast with the Sand King, Snake Lady, and Celestial who were waiting outside. The three of them had gloomy expressions on their faces and were depressed. Obviously, they were dissatisfied with Grimm forcefully suppressing them and not allowing them to participate in the final battle. It wasn't easy for them to team up and come to this sinister plane, and they even managed to severely injure that sinister and terrifying old dragon. If the members of the team gathered together to kill the old dragon, they might be able to ask for a fair share of the old dragon's treasure. But now, the final battle had been taken care of by the Lich alone. Their personal gains would definitely be greatly affected when it came to splitting the spoils. With that in mind, it was no wonder they looked at the Lich and Grimm with resentment and anger. Songonus was an experienced fellow. He raised an eyebrow and immediately stood up to express his stance. I've opened the door to Nax's treasury. Apart from the winter box, I only took my share and left the rest of the treasures untouched. If you head over now, you can split them evenly. Consider this your reward for participating in this mission. Hearing this, the Sand King and the Snake Lady finally broke into a smile. They immediately dashed into the tottering temple like arrows. Celestial Spirit Turaz stood there for a moment and glanced at the Lich and Grimm before rushing over without a word. After the three left, Songonus turned to Grimm. Grimm's expression did not change. He had no intention of getting up to snatch the treasures. You're strange, Songonus praised. You're the most mysterious wizard I've ever met. Sometimes I really can't figure out what you're after." Grim did not answer the Lich's question. Instead, he looked into the mist and frowned. "Why did you lure them into the mist? Are you trying to catch them all?" He smiled coldly and said, "In the past, given my personality, I would have killed those fools as well. Back in the day, I would have gotten rid of those fools as well. What about now?" Grim smiled leisurely. "Of course it's different now. I've gotten everything I want. I'm confident I can take another step forward. Leave these fools alive. I might have a chance to make use of them in the future." At that, the Lich's scarlet soulfire circled around Grim's body. "As for you, our agreement still stands. For 200 years from now, I'm willing to form an alliance with you and become a member of your family." At their level, although it couldn't be said that their words were the law, every word they said and every oath they made had all kinds of strange power that could cause the power of the law to resonate with them. Even without the help of a magic contract, the moment Songonus said those words, the aura of laws permeated the air. An ancient and obscure thread of fate had already bound him and Grim together. Neither of them refused, and the strange lines that represented the power of fate and karma entered their bodies, slowly fusing with their souls. Such a contract did not have any punishment. Instead, it was tied to the spiritual power of both parties. If the Lich's spiritual power completely overwhelmed Grim's, it would be fine even if it violated the contract. However, if Grim's spiritual power was much higher than his and he violated the contract, the price he would have to pay would be much higher as well. No high-order being would dare to ignore something that involved the origin of the soul. After the contract was established, the relationship between Grim and the Lich immediately became closer. Although they had yet to reach the level of intimacy, at least they were no longer as cautious as the others, always on guard against each other's sneak attacks. "You've done me a great favor. Keep this well." Songonus raised his hand and tossed over a strange heart the size of a millstone. As soon as the heart appeared, the surrounding mist immediately condensed into fine ice shards, and began to fall down with a rustling sound. A bone-chilling cold spread in all directions, causing the blood of those who felt it to freeze and their bodies to stiffen. Nax's heart? Grim almost cried out in shock. The huge heart that was frozen in the thick ice crystal was still pulsating slightly, still maintaining a strong and abundant vitality. The aura of life coming from it was no different from that of Nax the frozen bone dragon. "Kakik, I didn't expect that old dragon to be so attached to his past body." He actually dug out the dragon's heart and sealed it in a block of ice before transforming himself. The Lich's upper and lower jaws lightly bumped together, producing a melodious voice. "Looks like he planned to find a way to restore his dragon body after the soul transformation. But now, Kakik, all of this has become our spoils of war." Grim held the huge heart in his hand and used the AI chip to scan its life force and strength. He nodded in satisfaction and stuffed it into his ring of authority. At their level, apart from high-ranked equipment, normal equipment could not be used. Even if they wore low-ranked equipment, they would not be able to increase their strength in the slightest. In addition, when they fought, the powerful power of laws would fill their bodies. These low-ranked equipment could not even withstand the flames infused with the power of laws, much less attack their enemies. They would be incinerated into ashes. Hence, apart from equipment suitable for their level, the rest of the low-ranked treasures would be wasted on them. The frozen dragon's heart was a decent grade 4 material no matter how one looked at it. Whether it was made into a magic tool or a single-use magic tool, it would definitely be powerful. Grim accepted the Lich's kindness without any hesitation. "What do we do with this plane?" Grim looked up at Kongnus. "The resources and environment here have been severely distorted by the Winter's Chest. It'll be difficult to restore it to its original state. If you're interested, you can keep it. I don't think those three would dare fight you for it." The Lich could not help but suggest. After saying that, it casually pulled open a small interdimensional teleportation portal. Before he left, he said one last thing. I'll keep my promise. I'll return to the skeletal plane to rest for a while. It'll take about 2 to 3 years. Once things have stabilized, I'll personally pay you a visit. See you then. See you then. After Kongness entered the gate, there was a flash of white light, and the space slowly closed up. With such a precious treasure on him, he did not dare to make the long journey. He would rather spend more energy and resources to teleport back to avoid any mishaps along the way. Chapter 1273. Grimm's return was just like his departure. No one knew about it. The majority of the Crimson Magi knew that the legendary fire Magus Grimm had been living in seclusion within the Flame Monarch's wizard pagoda, as if he had never left. Even within the Crimson family, only a few of the higher-ups knew about his departure and return. The first thing Grimm did after returning to the wizard's pagoda was naturally to pass the icy world's waymark to Merrill. He had already buried a positioning rune stone there. With this waymark, the exploration team would be able to save a lot of calculations and lock-on procedures. The icy world's environment was too monotonous, and the laws of the plane were disrupted by the powerful divine weapon. However, it was still a decent small plane, suitable for ice element magi to live there. The Crimson family was no longer a small family of 2 or 3. It was now a super family that was rapidly developing. The influx of large numbers of magi from outside had put the family's territories to a harsh test. Currently, the 2 large territories were unable to bear the burden. Under these circumstances, Grimm had the intention to loosen the restrictions on foreign magi, allowing them to participate in the internal operations of the family. Hence, after careful consideration, Grimm decided to open up the family's strongholds in the Lance dimension and the outer regions, speeding up the development and expansion of these 2 enclaves. In the past, the Crimson family did not have such a foundation. Once the restrictions were lifted, it would be easy for enemies to know everything about the family and target them for destruction. But now, the Lance dimension was guarded by the level 4 Thunder Dragon arms, and the level 3 Alien Brain and Steel City were guarding it. Anyone who wanted to cause trouble here would have to weigh their own strength and see if they had the right to do so. The family headquarters in the Magus world had a level 4 Mary looking after them, and the properties in the north had a level 4 Alice looking after them. Coupled with the powerful legendary fire Magus hiding behind the scenes, the Crimson family now had enough resources and was no longer afraid of any challenges from the secular world or the Magi community. Sometimes, Grimm even started to grumble that those who didn't like him were too quiet and docile. As for him, should he send someone to provoke them and make them lively again? The days without enemies were really depressing. During this trip to the Wizard Association, Grimm had seen another wizard organization that was developing together, and he was greatly touched. If the scattered tower forest was said to be filled with small family businesses, then the Mage Association would undoubtedly be a large industrial and mechanical system that gathered everyone's strength. The advantages and disadvantages of both sides were clear at a glance. It was a miracle that the scattered tower forest could survive for so long in the midst of the 3 major Magus organizations. And behind this miracle, one could vaguely feel traces of human manipulation. However, Grimm wasn't willing to delve too deeply into it. Instead, he simply considered the development and future of the Crimson family. If the Crimson family revealed their fangs and attacked the other Magi, with the power Grimm had gathered, there was a high chance that he would be able to achieve his goal and unify the central continent. Although the central region would fall into a sorcerer war that would last for hundreds of years, it would also have the opportunity to unify and form a force similar to the 3 great sorcerer organizations. However, the prerequisite for success was that there would be no interference from the outside world. Once the 3 great sorcerer organizations interfered, not only would the chances of the unification fail greatly increase, It might even break the tacit agreement of the past. The central continent would completely lose its neutral position and become a battlefield where the three great sorcerer organizations openly competed and showed off their muscles. When that happened, the central continent would become a quagmire of war, and all the grand blueprints and achievements would become someone else's wedding dress. From this point of view, it was worth pondering the reason why the Wizard Association, which was the most powerful force, was so gentle to him, and could even be considered friendly. Perhaps the Wizard Association, who had always wanted to infiltrate the central continent, had long since hoped that the scattered tower forest would fall into chaos. If that happened, they would be able to protect their own interests and avoid the agreement that the three great sorcerer organizations had long since reached out to the central continent and send troops into the central continent. Thus, after considering all the factors, the idea of creating chaos in the central continent and then taking advantage of the chaos was not feasible. Since force was not going to work, they would have to use diplomacy. After careful consideration, Grimm, who had returned to the Wizard's Pagoda, took the opportunity to propose the establishment of a public wizard academy. There would only be more wizard academies in the scattered tower forest region of the central continent. If they really wanted to investigate, there would be at least 300 of them. However, their basic model was that of a contract. In other words, outsiders had to choose to join the academy and sign a service contract for a certain period of time before they could obtain the necessary knowledge and resources. Even the wizard academies that claimed to be public were the same. However, their target was not a wizard family or wizard faction, but the Scattered Tower Forest Wizard Association. If they wanted to win the favor of the wandering wizards and independent wizards, they could only come up with better and more favorable conditions. Grimm's plan was to change the contract model to one that charged fees. The public wizard academy established by the Crimson family would no longer force outsiders to sign service contracts, but would instead sell knowledge and resources at a clear price. This would also weaken the resistance of the wandering wizards and independent wizards towards the academy. Moreover, the Crimson family had many Grade 4 magi and powerhouses, using them as a golden signboard to recruit apprentices and conduct public classes every few days. This was something that many low-ranked magi did not even dare to dream of. Mary could support a large blood element, Alice could gain the favor of all the prophets, Gazruvi was suitable for the spirit element, Amelia was the best candidate for the plant element, Remy was definitely a poison element, Ganga was a magic element, Bliss was a mutant element. If they could capture arms to create the dragon element, add on the undead element created by the Lich and Grimm's fire element. To be honest, the appearance of so many high-level teachers would definitely cause a commotion in the academy. The wandering wizards and independent wizards would also flock to them. This was the attraction of knowledge, resources, and powerful wizards. It was also the choice of the wizard. Under these circumstances, even if some people were unwilling, they would not be able to point out the Crimson family's wrongdoing. If they dared to cause trouble, the Crimson family would take out the butcher's knife that they had hidden for a long time. The external factions could not possibly deprive the Crimson family of their right to protect themselves, right? However, for this idea to be realized, first, the family's golden name had to be attractive. Second, the family's knowledge and resources had to be sufficient. Third, they had to have a group of strong and obedient core members. The Crimson family basically had all these points. For the sake of this grand idea, Grimm began to talk to Alice and Mary. He also held countless secret meetings with the core members of the family, discussing every detail and every step of the establishment of a public wizard academy. Finally, after a year and a half of meticulous preparation, the Horton Academy was officially established in a place called Iron Forest City. Iron Forest City, Horton Academy. Ever since the eye-catching Wizard Tower was erected, the place had become lively and noisy. As the area of Iron Forest City was too small, the Horton Academy was chosen to be located by the Roy River, in the vast area surrounding the Horton Wizard Tower. There were lush and dense magic jungles, gloomy swamps with thick fog, huge mausoleums built underground, and magic machine towns that were filled with the roaring of furnaces all day long. The entire Horton Academy could be roughly divided into more than 10 different wizard divisions. The one with the title of Dean was the legendary fire wizard Grimm, who was rarely seen. He was also the head of the fire division. Beside Grimm, the names on the list of the divisions were all eye-catching, causing every wizard who came to investigate the new academy to tremble in fear. Blood Element, Division Head, Mary, Level 4, Division Heads, Soros, Level 3, Rother, Level 3 Division Mentors, Isa, Level 3, Spara, Level 3, Dolores, Level 3, Severus, Level 3, Winlier, Level 3. There were a total of 33 foreign professors and external mentors in the division, almost all of whom were high-level blood breeds above Level 2. They were mainly active in the ancient Blood Castle, the Horton Wizard Tower, and the Serpent Bird Cliff. The internal members of the division chose to train in the Hyzen Plain and the Black Forest. Fire Element, Division Head, Grimm, Level 4, Division Heads, Sindar, Level 3, Montague, Level 3 Division Mentor, Braith, Shabini, Level 2, Durban, Psyche, Level 2, Vincent, Gore, Level 2. There were a total of 17 professors and mentors in the Fire Element Division. Grimm was only an honorary division head in name. All the specific matters were handled by the Flame Tiger Sindar and Montague, who was recommended by the Flame Tyrant. They were mainly active in the Horton Wizard Tower, the Flame Monarch, and the Lance Plane. They chose the Fire Elemental Plane as their training ground. Necromancy Element, Division Head, Kongnas, Level 4, Division Heads, Retribution Knight Shattered, Level 4, High-Level Lich Wall, Level 4, Division Mentors, Lich Gars, Level 3, Undead Demoness Seelan, Level 3, Zombie Lord Kents, Level 2. It could be said that the entire necromancy element was supported by the high-level undead recommended by the Lich Kongnas. Wizards or apprentices who could study here had the opportunity to head to the Bone Plane to find wild undead suitable for them. Chapter 1274. Just as Grimm had predicted, the appearance of the Horton Sorcerer Academy caused an uproar in the central continent. There had never been a sorcerer academy that could gather so many high-grade sorcerers and powerful creatures from other planes. There had never been a sorcerer academy that could spread its learning and training grounds across more than 10 secondary planes. There had never been a sorcerer academy that could recruit students from the outside world without any restrictions. Therefore, when the list of Horton Sorcerer Academy's teachers was made public, the entire scattered Tower Forest, and even the central continent, were in an uproar. There were no restrictions on race, gender, lineage, or quota. There were no restrictions on high-grade knowledge and magus resources. There was no discrimination. There were excellent magus facilities. There were also many illustrious and dazzling mentors. The Horton Sorcerer Academy borrowed from the Sorcerer Association's training model. Instead of focusing on the family's sorcerers, it opened up the Crimson family's high-quality resources to the outside world. It was similar to a public welfare sorcerer academy. This allowed the Horton Sorcerer Academy to take root in the Crimson family, but it was not part of the family's system. It became a strange melting pot that nurtured free sorcerers. From the first day of school, the Horton Sorcerer Academy did not care about the background of the students. Even if they were from other sorcerer families, the Academy would accept them and provide them with basic resources in a fair and open manner. As long as you had magic crystals and were willing to stay in the Horton Sorcerer Academy, the door would always be open for you. There were no service contracts, no compulsory missions, no discrimination based on bloodline, no discrimination based on status. There was no discrimination, and you could come and go as you pleased. And this was undoubtedly the most attractive part of it. Most of the sorcerer families in the central continent did not have good living conditions. Apart from a few sorcerer families that could conquer other planes and plunder vast amounts of resources, most sorcerer families were lucky to have a secondary plane that could provide them with magic crystals and resources. The scarce resources in the family had to be given to the powerful or talented people. Normal sorcerers and acolytes were in a difficult situation. The majority of the normal sorcerers and acolytes wanted to obtain some resources, but they could only bite the bullet and trade with the sorcerer families. The terms of the trade were either a service contract for a certain period of time, or they had to step into the plane battlefield and conquer other planes. Either he sold his body or he sold his life. There was no other way. After all the Magus resources had been monopolized by Magus families of all sizes. But now, the appearance of the Horton Witchcraft Academy provided them with a new option. For those wandering wizards or independent wizards, they could go to the academy and become a teacher. They could teach public classes, refine potions, write scrolls, craft wizard beasts, puppets, etc. They could earn the corresponding magic crystals as a reward. Then, they could use these rewards to buy high-level knowledge that was open to the public. Since they were free, they could come and go as they pleased. They didn't need to be restrained or controlled by anyone or any organization, so their lives weren't in danger. Furthermore, as mentors of the academy, they could enjoy a certain amount of free witchcraft facilities. For those independent magi who had accumulated a large amount of magic materials but had no place to deal with them, this was a great thing. Furthermore, the Crimson family was wealthy, and the core wizard pagoda of the Horton Wizard Academy was also top-notch. The witchcraft facilities inside were complete and exquisite. Even in the central continent they were the best. At the very least, the smaller wizard academies in various regions couldn't compare to the Horton Witchcraft Academy in terms of wealth, resources, and manpower. Hence, when the independent magi and acolytes heard of such good conditions, they all rushed to Iron Forest City. In less than half a year, Iron Forest City was forced to go through 3 expansions. The permanent population also skyrocketed from 6,000 to 120,000. This nameless little city at the edge of the Alovis region had become the most popular large-scale wizard city in the central continent because of its proximity to the Horton Witchcraft Academy. Ferd South City, Salubo family's base. AMU, who was wearing a gray wizard robe, passed through a silent and dark magic tunnel. He passed through a membrane of light that shone with a faint magic glow and arrived at the public passage of the spell district. In front of him was a rather wide stone passage. Apprentices of the family in 2s and 3s were holding books in their hands, walking quickly towards the learning hall. Wizard AMU's public curses class was only 3 minutes away, so the apprentices who arrived late had to speed up. They didn't want to miss this once-a-week free class. As the teacher of this class, AMU would also receive a certain amount of magic crystals and mission points from the family to support his expensive witchcraft experiments that were close to bankruptcy. However, when Wizard AMU arrived at the entrance of the learning hall, he was surprised to see 2 male and 1 female apprentice standing at the door, as if they were waiting for his arrival. AMU hesitated for a moment. They were all high-level apprentices under his command, and they were the ones with the best aptitude. Seeing AMU's arrival, the 3 apprentices surrounded him. They looked at each other nervously. Obviously, there were some difficult things that they couldn't talk about. "What are you guys doing here? The class is about to start. I don't have much time to deal with you guys. Let's talk about it after class." AMU frowned. Natalie, the petite female apprentice with freckles on her face, finally mustered up the courage to speak. "Teacher, we want to say goodbye to you." "Goodbye? Are you going on a long journey?" AMU's frown deepened. "Your mental energy has just reached a high level, and you're still far from the level of a prospective wizard. Don't be in such a hurry to train, not to train, not to train? Then why are you saying goodbye at the same time? Tell me, did something happen to your family?" Amu asked in a low voice. Nothing happened to our family. It's just that we want to leave this place and go to another place to further our studies. The conditions there are very good. Many of our friends in the Wizard's Pagoda have already left. We just want to say goodbye to you before we leave. Amu was silent. His face was a little pale, making him look older and weaker. These years, he had been living a very depressing life. He had been living in the Sarubo family as a traitor of the Crimson family. Although the family treated him fairly and took good care of him, many people who knew the inside story laughed at him behind his back. Even those ant-like sorcerer apprentices who bumped into him in the hallway would look at him with a look of disdain and sympathy that could not be concealed behind their respectful gazes. He was one of the first 5 disciples to follow the legendary fire wizard Grimm, and he was the only one among them who had an affinity with fire. He had betrayed his own teacher because of his loyalty to the Sarubo family. If Grimm had died just like that, Amu would have become a model example of someone who set things right. He would have been praised by everyone, and his status in the family would have risen significantly. But life was unpredictable. The script of life never seemed to be written according to the thoughts of the weak. Grimm had been suppressed by the Sarubo family for so long, but he still managed to rise. What was even more terrifying was that his strength had even surpassed that of the level 3 witch Sanazar, who ruled the Sarubo family. In the battle between the powerhouses of the Tower Forest Association, Sanazar had been humiliated by Grimm and was forced to move to a secondary plane to recuperate. Now, the one who ruled and managed the Sarubo family was none other than Lady Purple Eye, who was as famous as Sanazar. However, just as the family was planning to take revenge on Grimm, a terrifying piece of news arrived. Grimm had actually advanced to level 4. The moment the news spread, the entire Sarubo family fell into silence. Level 4. Level 4. Level 4 in the sorcerer world, level 4 was the pinnacle of existence. If Grimm decided to make things difficult for the Sarubo family, it would be useless even if the Sarubo family had the support of a level 6 Great Wizard. After all, the Great Wizard Sarubo's main body was far away, and he was powerless in the sorcerer world's internal affairs. Hence, Amu hid in the Sarubo family's encampment in fear, not daring to step out of Feldenan City ever again. Even though he chose to seal himself off, news from afar continued to pour in. In the past 200 years, the Crimson family and the legendary Fire Wizard were the most powerful forces in the Central Continent. Every once in a while, there would be the latest explosive news that would set off a wave within the family. However, the news that made Amu grit his teeth the most was that the Red Dragon Witch Merrill had advanced to level 3. The night the news spread, Amu smashed everything in his residence and laboratory, got drunk, and lay in the ruins screaming in pain for the whole night. He had always thought that he no longer cared about what happened in the distant lands. However, after that night, he finally understood that he still cared. Fortunately, time was the best medicine. Nearly 100 years of silence and busyness had allowed him to calm down once more, and he became the most hard-working and dedicated level 1 wizard in the Sarubo family. Indeed, more than 200 years had passed, and Amu's life was mostly over. Even when his appearance and body had deteriorated and aged, he was still an ordinary level 1 wizard. Today, he was stopped by 3 of his disciples who he had personally taught, saying that they wanted to bid him farewell. For some reason, Amu's heart told him that this might be related to that demonic fellow. A ferocious beast was roaring in Amu's heart. Amu clenched his teeth and asked gently with a smile, "Tell me, where did you guys go?" Natalie was speechless. In the end, another male acolyte, Ruther, mustered up the courage to speak. Horton Witchcraft Academy was established by the Crimson family. Crimson. It really is the Crimson family. It's that accursed name again. Did that demon cast some kind of curse on me? I'll be able to hear that damned name no matter where I hide. Mu could only feel a roar in his head. the last trace of blood on his face quickly faded, and he tasted a fishy sweetness in his mouth. His body swayed, and he used his hands to support himself against the wall. As the three acolytes screamed in fear, he slowly fell to the ground. Chapter 1275. Kethrin Castle, the Tower Forest Association's base. Within a tightly guarded secret magus room, two people who represented the highest authority in the association sat opposite each other, their faces filled with worry and their moods stifled. After a long while, President Freed finally spoke. "How is it? What's the situation inside the association?" Sitting on the sofa opposite, Vice President Merva's expression was gloomy, and his eyes flickered. It was obvious that he was also experiencing extreme emotions. "Basically, it's still stable," Merva replied in a hoarse voice. "Most of the Magi in the association have signed a service contract. Before the contract expires, they won't be able to do anything rash. On the contrary." "What is it?" "On the contrary, more than half of the new acolytes that were sent over this year did not choose to sign a contract with the association. They seem to be waiting and waiting for the association to come up with even better conditions. These weak-willed bastards. If the association doesn't step up to stop them, they can only muddle-headedly rot in the villages, becoming either farmers or lowly adventurers. Immediately investigate their families and put pressure on them." I don't believe that their families will dare to be half-hearted." Merva nodded silently, gently rubbing the snake eye ring on his right pinky, and quickly sent out a new order. After doing all this, Merva could not help but say in disappointment, "It seems that Grimm intends to go against us. How should we deal with him?" Hearing his companion's question, the cunning President Freed could not help but sigh. "This Grimm may be young, but he's very experienced and calm. In order to avoid going against us, he did not directly expand his family's territory. This way, we won't even have an excuse to summon the elders to punish him. He's still young, at most 300 years old. He has a lot of time to waste with us. From the Crimson family's current actions, it can be seen that he no longer plans to start a Magus war and expand his family's territory. Instead, he's targeting the next 2, 3, or even 4 or 5 generations. That's right, he's really patient. It's obvious that he wants to tire us out. In the past 200 to 300 years, apart from Grimm, there hasn't been a new rank 4 Magus in the central continent. You and I have already advanced for more than 800 years. Even if we find more life resources, it will be very difficult for us to persist for another 200 years. The other elders of the association are about the same age as us. Even the youngest, Clara, is already 500 years old. So, the other party avoided a direct battle and chose the new generation. I'm afraid they're waiting for us old fellows to die of old age." Once the old batch of rank 4 Magi reach the end of their lifespans, the new generation of rank 4 Magi will probably have to live under his terrifying shadow. At that time, even if he doesn't start the Magus War, who in the central continent will dare to go against his will? The two higher-ups of the Pagoda Forest Association complained to each other, but they couldn't think of any way to deal with Grimm. In terms of strength, the legendary Fire Wizard was probably the strongest wizard in the central continent. Not long ago, this guy had gone to the Wizard Association's encampment in the eastern part of the continent and had a good conversation with the wizards there. According to the information Fred had gathered, the Sorcerer Association had a very high evaluation of him, even listing him as the flame sorcerer closest to a super powerhouse. Super expert. What was that? They were all at the peak of rank 4, powerful existences that had the highest chance of advancing to rank 5. And this legendary fire wizard had only reached rank 4 a few years ago, yet he was actually able to obtain such a high evaluation from the Sorcerer Association. Of course, Fred and the others would never doubt the judgment of the Sorcerer Association, but they were secretly afraid that the legendary fire wizard's strength had increased too much. If this trend continued, the entire central continent and the scattered pagoda forest would sooner or later fall into the hands of this legendary fire wizard. Fred, who had painstakingly planned for this for so long without any results, was naturally unwilling to give up. He was even more unwilling to let everything he had done become someone else's wedding dress. However, when he flipped through the list of teachers in the Horton Witchcraft Academy, a long list of illustrious and dazzling names came into view. Rank 4. Rank 4. Rank 4. So many rank 4 magi, from the Dragon Lord to the Flame Lord to the Undead Lich. Truth be told, Fred's heart trembled when he saw this list. In the past, he might have had the determination to use the Pagoda Forest Association's several hundred years of history to scare away Grimm's ambitions. However, looking at the number of powerhouses that Grimm had roped in, and then looking at the 3 walnuts and 2 dates around him, the fighting spirit that had gathered in his heart had long since dissipated. For no reason, Fred felt an indescribable sense of sorrow and depression. His tense spirit suddenly relaxed, and he slowly collapsed on the soft sofa, a tear silently flowing from the corner of his wrinkled eyes. "We can't defeat him." Milva also sighed. "If we old fellows die, the entire central continent will fall into his hands. So, in the next 100 or 200 years, I want to carefully nurture a few good seedlings in the family. Whether or not we can continue our legacy in the future will depend on them." Fred remained silent, not replying. Take President Fred for example. The Sidmund family he belonged to had over 3,000 members, and those who had his direct bloodline numbered over 400. Among them, 127 had the talent to become a magus, and only 2 were able to advance to rank 3 magi. Even these 2 descendants who were at rank 3 did not have much value in nurturing them. This was because their innate talent and potential were insufficient, and they had relied on a large amount of resources to barely climb to their current level. However, among Fred's direct descendants, there was a granddaughter whose innate talent and potential were not bad. She was only 200 years old, yet she was already a high-rank 2 magus. However, it was shockingly difficult to raise her to level 4 within 100 or 200 years. Hence, when he thought about the decline of his family after his death, Fred's heart could not help but twitch. He was very clear that if he offended Grimm now, the other party might not be able to do anything about it. However, once he passed away at the end of his lifespan, the clansmen and descendants he left behind would definitely suffer the bloody and terrifying devastation of Grimm. The magus world was cruel and real. When he was around, everyone would give him face and treat the Sidmund family as an ancient and respectable magus family. However, once he was gone, at that time there would not be a single rank 4 magus in the family to support them, and they would naturally be at the mercy of others. Fred raised his head and looked at Merva, his eyes filled with hesitation and pain. He knew that Merva's family was similar to his own, and it would be difficult to find a descendant who could handle the situation. A few years ago, Merva's grandson had not let him down, and had actually given birth to a little fellow with decent talent. However, he was only at the mid-rank 1 magus, and wanting to raise him would be 100 times more difficult than raising his own granddaughter. Hence, the 2 of them, not to mention a heir, had the same headache and dilemma. It's impossible for us to continue fighting with Grimm. However, Clara and Alfred are still young, and have 300 to 400 years to live. They won't be willing to be suppressed by the Crimson family, right? Maybe we should rope them in, Merva said as he twirled his beard. Alfred, that fellow's Molten City has formed an alliance with the Crimson family, and has made a lot of money from selling the rare underground ores. Don't expect him to come out and cause trouble. At the mention of the Molten City Lord, President Fred was filled with anger. However, he hesitated again. We can try to fight for Clara. Her family's territory is next to the Crimson family's, and she will definitely be under more pressure than us. If there's some friction between them, it might be able to suppress Grimm's arrogance. Hearing this, Merva's eyes brightened, and he could not help but sneer. Isn't that simple? I'll arrange it immediately, and guarantee that the two families will soon fight. With Clara leading the way and Matthew, Nicholas, and Gaia, we can at least suppress the Crimson family's momentum, and buy us more time to respond. Chapter 1276. Eastern part of the continent, Overlook Tower. In a strange secret room on the top floor, the skinny Mastana was lying comfortably on his luxurious bed, snoring loudly. Inside this secret room, one could see luxurious furniture and furnishings everywhere, and the walls were hung with pictures of voluptuous women. The dining table in the corner of the wall was filled with a full set of gold and silver cutlery. Under the illumination of the bright witchcraft light, it reflected a misty and illusory glow. If an outsider accidentally entered this place, they would not believe that this was the residence of a rank 4 sorcerer. This was because the entire residence was filled with an extremely extravagant and decadent aura. It did not match the mysterious and powerful aura of a high-ranked sorcerer. Furthermore, he could not find any items related to witchcraft even after searching through the entire residence. Instead, he found some of the favorite little objects of the human nobles scattered all over the place. They were mixed in the luxurious and expensive silk undergarments, causing one's imagination to run wild. However, just as Mastana was sleeping soundly with a huge pillow with the picture of a Satsuma girl between his hands and feet, a ripple appeared in the air at a corner of the room. A strange eye of magic appeared and blinked its illusory eyes as it looked around the room curiously. The eye of magic looked illusory and real, but it actually existed in the air. It was like a blurry shadow the size of a fist, floating around the room as if it was extremely curious about everything in the room. Finally, its gaze landed on the ugly, naked Mastana who was sleeping soundly. The illusory eyeball moved closer and closer to him, taking in every detail of his body. It had to be said that Mastana was really ugly. There was not much flesh on his emaciated body. His loose, shriveled skin rested on top of his well-defined bones. From afar, he looked like a skeleton that was still breathing. His greenish-gray skin was covered with dark stripes. His chest, armpits, and feet, which should not have hair, were covered with messy, thick, black hair. On the contrary, his head, which should have been the most hairy, was only sparse, light yellow hair. As a Tier 4 prophet, Mastana obviously did not pay much attention to personal hygiene. His ugly body was covered in filth, and the entire room was filled with a horrible stench. Even though Mastana was in a deep sleep, the eye of magic was so close to him. Others might not be able to sense it, but he could not be more familiar with it. Mastana cursed as he woke up from his sleep. The first thing he saw when he opened his eyes was a pair of big, bright, and beautiful eyes. The pair of eyes were so large and clear that they occupied most of the visual space in front of him. He even had to lean back a few centimeters to see the magic eye floating in front of him. The pair of beautiful eyes stared at him silently through the eye of magic. "Bastard, it's you again, you brat!" A string of vile curses came out of Mastana's withered, crooked mouth. He waved his arms with all his might in an attempt to drive the eye of magic away. Unfortunately, the eye of magic only retreated half a meter and moved to the side where Mastana's arms could not reach. It continued to peep at him. "Ugly, is this your bedroom? It's really ugly and stinky, just like your body." The eye of magic gently shook the void and emitted a strange spiritual wave. "You always say that you're a Tier 4 sorcerer, but why can't I find anything related to witchcraft or prophecy in your bedroom? Can you show me around your laboratory? I'm very interested in the various experiments of Tier 4 sorcerers." The eye of magic seemed to be pestering Mastana. The eye of magic floated around Mastana, and scanned the surroundings while chatting with him casually. Mastana's ferocious face was filled with anger and helplessness. "Be quiet." A beam of golden light shot out from Mastana's palm and destroyed the Eye of Magic in midair. However, as soon as the Eye of Magic dissipated, the void around it rippled again, and a new Eye of Magic appeared. "Why did you destroy my Eye of Destiny? Don't you know that condensing it consumes the power of destiny? You've destroyed 73 of my Eyes of Destiny yesterday, and I haven't even settled the score with you yet." Mastana's previous actions seemed to be useless against the fellow hiding in front of the Eye of Void. The moment the Eye of Magic appeared, it started to bombard Mastana with words. The dignified Tier 4 prophet was so annoyed that he tossed and turned on his bed, unable to fall asleep. Mastana struggled to climb out of the luxurious bed. He grabbed a silk robe from the exquisite, soft-carpeted floor and draped it over his body. He then staggered towards the bathroom. "Brat, don't follow me. I'm going to take a bath. If you want to see an old man bathing, follow me." Mastana turned around and roared fiercely before entering the bathroom. This time, the threat seemed to have some effect. The Eye of Magic hesitated for a moment, but in the end it did not float into the bathroom. Instead, it floated around the bedroom. How could the personal residence of a Tier 4 magus be so simple? Although it looked luxurious and extravagant on the surface, it looked like the residence of a nouveau riche with no taste. However, in the cold interlayer of the walls, under the wooden floorboards, and on the ceiling where the huge crystal chandelier hung, there were countless protective spell formations. There were also obscure elemental waves in several hidden places in the bedroom. They were obviously hidden compartments and secret rooms that had been disguised and concealed. These hidden places were surrounded by layers of protective formations, which could isolate the detection of prophetic sorcery, as well as the infiltration of most extraordinary powers in the world. Unfortunately, the power contained in the Eye of Magic did not belong to the power of spells that were commonly seen in the secular world. It actually ignored the protective spells and moved around freely. After a few minutes, Mastana, who had just taken a hot bath, walked out of the bathroom feeling refreshed. He saw the Eye of Magic floating out of his secret room leisurely. That room was filled with his favorite and most precious treasures. Mastana's face immediately contorted into a sinister expression. Ever since he had peeped on his colleague in the north, he had been inexplicably entangled by the Lady Destiny. She seemed to be doted on by the power of destiny, and had a way of controlling destiny that was difficult for outsiders to understand. She had unintentionally captured Mastana's Eye of Destiny, which he had created himself, and had mastered this ability without anyone teaching her. From then on, she had become a terrifying nightmare that Mastana could not get rid of. The Lady Destiny seemed to be very curious about this strange old man who had a strong power of destiny. She used the Eye of Destiny that only Mastana could control and began to follow him around the clock. She was there when Mastana was meditating, she was there when Mastana was divining, she was there when Mastana was eating, she was there when Mastana was sleeping, and she was there when Mastana was hiding in the secret room protected by the power of destiny. In short, Mastana's power of destiny could perfectly protect his colleague in the north, but it was completely ineffective against the Lady Destiny. Mastana had tried all kinds of protective measures, but he still could not prevent the overly curious Lady Destiny from peeping on him. For half a year, every day and every moment, this annoying eyeball floated beside him, watching his every move. He couldn't keep even the slightest bit of privacy. Moreover, he was the only one who could see this strange Eye of Magic. Other sorcerers, including the other Tier 4 sorcerers in the association, could not see it with their naked eyes. To be honest, Mastana had done this kind of peeping on others many times in the past. However, he had never encountered a situation like this Lady Destiny peeping on others for half a year. What was more terrifying was that even if Mastana destroyed the other party's Eye of Destiny, the other party could summon another one in an instant. It seemed that the power of destiny had pampered this Lady Destiny too much. When she used the power of destiny, she did not seem to be strained at all. It was as if she did not feel any burden at all when she used the power of destiny. This was what made Mastana feel the most despair. "Brat, what do you want from me? Please, let me go. If I continue to be pestered by you, I will go crazy." Mastana immediately rushed over and grabbed the Eye of Magic. He put his face on it and roared loudly. "I told you long ago. You just have to teach me the destiny spell that you know, and I will not pester you anymore. I have been begging Teacher Alice for a long time, but she refused to teach me even a single destiny spell. She even said that I am the Lady Destiny, and that everything I want can only be obtained from destiny. She must be too stingy to teach me. She even came up with so many excuses." Upon hearing that it was the destiny spell, the pleading Mastana immediately changed his expression. He crushed his eyeball and turned to leave the room. After a while, a new eyeball floated behind him, and the sweet voice of the young lady could be heard from it. "Old man, you have destroyed another Eye of Destiny. If you continue to be so violent, I will broadcast my ugly naked body so that everyone around you can see your ugly side. Hurry, hurry up and teach me the destiny spell, or else I will broadcast it now." Mastana was infuriated. He cursed the strange girl who was like a monster of fate with vulgarities. The young lady seemed to be infuriated as well. A strange spiritual wave was emitted from the eyeball and quickly rippled in all directions. The ripples spread silently within the overlook tower. Every living being that was affected by the ripples, no matter what they were doing, had an image of a hunched and ugly naked man. Chapter 1277. The Sky City, the Prophet's Tower. Even within the Silver Alliance, the Prophet's Tower was an unusually mysterious and taboo place. It was hardly known to outsiders, and there was only one special profession that could go in and out of it: the scroll scholars, who wore silver robes and held a thick book in their arms. The Prophet's Tower was an important place for the scroll scholars to observe the general trend of the world and record the secrets of the world. At this moment, on a small stone platform on the outskirts of the 7th floor of the Prophet's Tower, a strange old man wearing a plain white robe with an old and weak face and a pair of tortoiseshell glasses on the bridge of his nose was leaning against the railing and silently examining the sky city that was illuminated by the warm sun. After a long time, he retracted his gaze and turned to return to the inside of the tower. This was a magical secret room filled with a strong aura of knowledge. There were not many furnishings in the room, and it was filled with all kinds of strange books. All the books were stacked together against the wall, reaching the ceiling that was more than 10 meters high. They were scattered and crooked, and it was only because of the heavy weight of the books above that they did not collapse. Standing in the room and looking around, there were almost no other items other than books. There was a small desk that was more than half a meter high in the middle of the room, and there were also countless scrolls, books, and notes that were either open, half-closed, or stacked together. There were also piles of books scattered on the path from where the old man stood to the small desk. Anyone who wanted to walk here would probably have to be careful, or else a careless mistake would cause a terrible collapse. With the old man's weak physique, it was obvious that he could not withstand such a disaster. Moreover, there was no lack of magic books that were flashing with the fluorescence of witchcraft among these scrolls. Once the protective spell formation on them was triggered, it would definitely create a terrible catastrophe here. However, at this moment, a delicate-looking young fellow was sitting cross-legged in front of a desk. He held a strange quill in his hand and was scribbling something on a sheepskin scroll. Seeing that the old man had returned from a stroll, the little fellow raised his head, and a pair of big bright eyes glinted with curiosity. "Teacher, did you see something again?" It was no wonder that the little fellow asked. According to the old man's past, it was his fixed habit to go to the rooftop in the afternoon to look at the scenery around the Sky City. This time was usually not less than half an hour, and it was also the only leisure activity he had. For the rest of the time, he lived in this sea of books, constantly writing and recording the major events that happened all over the world. Yes, this was one of the unique abilities of the scroll scholar. They were the witnesses of history. They were the recorders of history. Their naked eyes could see the mysterious events that happened somewhere in the plane from tens of millions of miles away. No matter how big or small these events were, without exception, they could deeply influence the future development of the entire world. Being a scroll scholar did not require advanced sorcery abilities. All they needed was a devout and convincing belief in fate. If the sorcerer world was the sorcerer world, then they were the sorcerer world's divine spellmasters. However, they didn't believe in a single champion, but the river of destiny that was hidden behind the scenes like a super complicated and incomparably precise machine that controlled everything. They were the servants and devout believers of the power of destiny. They never interfered with the operation of fate, but as humble servants, they used their own eyes and their own pens to observe and record all the major and minor events that affected the development of the entire sorcerer world. The places where they appeared often indicated that a major event that would deeply change the future direction of the world was about to take place there. They would use their paper and notes to record every historical moment of a genius sorcerer from birth to maturity, and then to the peak of glory, and then file them in detail and store them in the secret room of the Prophet's Tower. These documents, these secret scrolls, apart from the scroll scholars, even the chairman and deputy chairman of the Silver Alliance had no right to access them. The entire Prophet's Tower was like a strange organization that was isolated from the world. It did not rely on anyone, did not harm anyone, and silently observed and supervised all the important events that happened in the plane from a height that ordinary people could not understand. And what gave them this power was the omniscient eye placed at the top of the Prophet's Tower. Any scroll scholar would be enhanced by the omniscient eye as long as they were in the Prophet's Tower. Except for a few areas that were affected by strange forces, the rest of the sorcerer world was like a scroll in their eyes, which could be unfolded at any time, and they could cast their eyes on it at any time. In the eyes of the scroll scholars, there were no secrets in the world. However, at this moment, the old man, who looked unprepossessing but had a firm grasp of the entire Prophet's Tower and nearly 100 scroll scholars in it, seemed quite excited. As soon as he entered the room, he began to wave his arms. Fate is turning. Fate is turning. The river of fate has once again sent me a warning. A change and turmoil that will deeply change the future of the sorcerer world is appearing in the middle of the continent. Quick, quick, immediately inform Indel. I demand that all of his eagle group must be dispatched, and everything that happens there must be recorded for me. It was the first time that the young scroll scholar saw his teacher so excited, to the point of reaching a nervous level. He hurriedly brushed away the scroll that was being copied in front of him, took out a strange crystal from the depths of a pile of books beside him, placed it on the desk, and began to slowly rub and whisper. After a moment, light and shadow swayed in midair in the study room, and the shadow of a middle-aged man with a calm and determined face emerged. On the robe on his chest was a badge engraved with a scroll and a quill, and in the middle of his forehead was a magic pattern of a strange eyeball. That was the mark of the all-seeing eye. Pagoda Lord, why did you summon me so urgently? Has something happened? The newcomer bowed to the old man with a confused expression. Indel, dispatch all of your eagle group to the middle of the continent immediately. There, in a place called Iron Forest City, something big is happening. I want you to observe closely and record everything that happens there. All of the eagle group? The middle-aged man raised his head in surprise, but he immediately nodded and said, Understood, sir. I'll give the order immediately. I'll head there personally and preside over everything. I won't let you down. It's good that you understand. Remember, the main thread of fate is always hidden in all sorts of strange events. Your mission is to uncover the true main thread of fate, and carefully observe and record how fate affects the future through people and events one by one. In particular, you must find the individual that is driving the main thread of fate. He is the core that we should observe and understand the most. Yes. As Indel bowed in response, the image of his upper body slowly disappeared. A few minutes later, strange fellows wearing silver robes and holding sheepskin scrolls and quills suddenly walked out of the secret rooms in the Prophet's Tower. They came to the stone windows of the tower and turned into tall and majestic eagles, shrieking as they soared into the sky. The 11 eagles circled 3 times above the Prophet's Tower, and under the leadership of their leader, they turned their wings and flew towards the middle of the continent without hesitation. The young apprentice lying on the platform's railing could not help but withdraw his envious gaze and look at his teacher. "Teacher, don't even think about it. You're still young and inexperienced, so you don't know how sinister the people outside can be. You'll be at a great disadvantage if you travel like this. If I travel with Uncle Indel, that should be fine, right?" They have a mission, so they can't split their attention to take care of you. Besides, how many archives of the continent have you read? Upon hearing the old man mention this, the young apprentice immediately felt a headache. "Teacher, the archives of the history of the continent alone fill up 300 secret rooms. I only reached year 31428 of the sorcerer calendar. That means you only understand the history of the continent for more than 1,500 years. There are still more than 30,000 years waiting for you to read. Before you finish reading the entire continent's history and become a true scroll scholar, I won't let you travel." After hearing the old man's answer, the young apprentice's facial muscles could not help but twitch violently. He spent a whole 2 years studying the ancient scrolls day and night, and only then did he grasp the development and changes of the continent in the past 1,000 years. But to extend the historical process to 30,000 years ago, including the development of the 3 major sorcerer organizations, the terrifying amount of reading was enough to make one despair. Thornk, this is the basic skill of a scroll scholar. If you don't grind away the anxiety and laziness of human nature in the vast sea of scrolls, you won't be able to hold that quill steadily. Every scholar who walks out of the Prophet's Tower represents the omniscient eye, and is a trustworthy partner. But you're still far from that. Then, teacher, if there are apprentices who can't handle this complicated and boring life and want to give up halfway, what will happen to them? Thornk's eyes flickered. "Haha! What kind of place is the Prophet's Tower? No one can take away the secrets of the world from here. If you can't become a scroll scholar, the moment you give up, everything in your mind will disappear." Saying this, the old man leaned on his staff and gazed into the distance outside the window. He said leisurely, "No one can take away the secrets here. They are fated to belong here." The young Thornk wiped the cold sweat off his forehead, calmed his mind, and bowed to the old man. He then returned to the wooden table and immersed himself in reading and recording. At the top of the tower, a strange eye flickering with golden luster was tirelessly gazing into the distance. Chapter 1278. Silver Alliance, Sky City. As one of the core areas above Sky City, the Prophet's Tower's every move naturally affected the higher-ups of the Silver Alliance. In less than a quarter of an hour, the news of the Eagle Group's mobilization was placed on the table of the chairman of the Alliance, and his expression gradually turned solemn. Although the chairman of the Alliance, Salvini, still maintained his human form, his skin showed a pale gold color similar to softened metal. His every move was a little sluggish, and from time to time, there was a strange sound of magic machinery operating in his body. As the highest-ranking mechanical wizard, the chairman of the Alliance, Salvini's mechanical transformation of his body had reached an astonishing level. Rather than calling him a mechanical magus, it would be more accurate to say that he was a strange metallic lifeform. Eagle Group, All members dispatched. Salvini spread out the sheepskin scroll with his stiff fingers and slowly read the report that slowly emerged on it. Those old-fashioned guys in the Prophet's Tower, every time we apply to access the information inside, they always make excuses. It's not that the secrets of the order cannot be leaked, it's that the information we access is too sensitive, and our people return empty-handed every time. The Alliance provides them with so many magical crystals every year, but they are not willing to contribute at all. How outrageous! Next to him, the deputy chairman of the Alliance, Meloni, who had also transformed himself into a hodgepodge of strange magical machinery, complained bitterly. Salvini shook his head and smiled bitterly. Don't complain. Although both of us belong to the higher-ups of the Alliance and are in charge of the entire Sky City, on the surface, we seem to have boundless glory. But we know in our hearts that this is all fake. At least, the three most important places in Sky City, the Prophet's Tower, the Whirlpool Tower, and the Obelisk, are not in our control. If it weren't for the elders fighting for it, I'm afraid we wouldn't even be able to touch the mechanical secret realm. Meloni, the deputy chairman, was still a little indignant. He gritted his teeth and said, "Why don't we suspend the magical crystal support of the Prophet's Tower and force them to make concessions?" Hearing this bad idea, Salvini shook his head even faster. The Prophet's Tower is a mysterious place left behind by the elders in the Alliance, and it is completely not controlled and managed by the Alliance Council. Do you know that when the previous speaker handed over the responsibility to me, he repeatedly reminded me that the supply of resources to the few secret places could not be cut off, and that we had to interfere with their operations in any way we could? It was Meloni's first time hearing this news. He was stunned and stammered, "Then he means, the old chairman has made his intentions very clear. The most important thing in this sky castle is not us, nor is it those outside, but these secret places. The reason why the first-generation Alliance Parliament spent a huge amount of resources and manpower to build the Sky Castle was not to show off our power, but to protect these secret places. So, to put it bluntly, we are not the masters of this place, but a group of guards." There was an awkward silence and speechlessness. After a long time, Deputy Chairman Meloni spoke again. "Then what do you think of this matter? Those scholars have always been secretive and tight-lipped. The only thing that can pique their interest is the major events happening in various parts of the plane, the kind that can affect the development of the entire plane. So, they've mobilized a large number of people this time. Something big must have happened. By the way, have you figured out where they're going?" "Yes, it seems to be the Central Continent." "Central Continent? What's happening there recently?" "Get Lorcan to send over all the intelligence on the Central Continent in the past few years. We need to go through it carefully. Perhaps we can find some clues from there." "Understood, I'll inform him to send the intelligence over now." The blazing flame monarch, Grimm, who never liked to get involved in mundane matters, handed over the matters of the Wizard Academy to his subordinates and hid in the Wizard's Pagoda, starting a new round of wizard research. At his level, all research couldn't get around the strange existence of rules. As a level 4 wizard, it was too much for him to directly study laws, so he could only lower his standards and start analyzing the various strange laws of the plane that made up the laws. On the other hand, studying the laws could bring him many benefits. Not to mention the various strange wizard effects brought about by the law of fire. Just the law of fire itself was the stepping stone for him to advance to level 5. In the past, Grimm was completely unfamiliar with the power of laws. Naturally, he was not willing to give up on any law of fire. But after the Law Rune upgrade and the refining process of the law of fire obtained from the Flame Tyrant, Grimm finally had a complete and thorough understanding of the power of laws for the first time. Not all laws of fire were suitable for him. If he wanted to walk a smoother path in the future, if he wanted to become more powerful in the future, carefully choosing the law of fire that suited him was the only way to go. Not knowing how to choose and being greedy was a common problem among most elemental wizards. After all, not everyone had such outstanding talent to be able to freely choose the elemental laws they wanted. Although the creation of an elemental law was closely related to the direction of a wizard's research, there were still many unexpected factors that could not be controlled. Hence, most elemental wizards would find it difficult to push their mental force to the limit of 50 points before their lives ended. Then, they would fuse various elemental laws to form their own unique power of laws. Most level 4 elemental wizards could not accumulate such a large amount of strength, so they could only rely on source substances and other special resources to shorten the process of comprehending a law. The power of laws brought about by source substances was usually random and difficult to control. Even if elemental wizards who relied on source substances were lucky enough to advance to level 5, they were the weakest group of level 5 great wizard. Almost all level 7 and level 8 great wizards in the sorcerer faction were ancient wizard. In the past 10,000 years, the number of new wizards who could reach this level had dwindled. The reason for this was because of the origin substance. Those who wanted to save trouble and take shortcuts faced a huge loss of talent and potential. The source substance would burn away all of their potential. It was precisely because of the dual nature of source substances that the various wizard camps in the outer regions strictly controlled the flow of source substances into the sorcerer world. This was to prevent too many wizards from being unable to endure the boring process of accumulating knowledge and comprehending laws and forcefully using source substances to increase their rank. In the eyes of those great wizards, the birth of a level 6 great wizard was far more significant than the birth of 10 level 5 great wizard. In a brightly lit alchemy laboratory, Grimm was standing in front of the alchemy table, meticulously mixing the alchemy solution in front of him. Blue gold, luminous stone, radiant stone, sunflower, hops, blood of the mountains. More than 10 extremely precious magic ingredients were separated and fused into the alchemy solution. Hops, crush and extract juice. 13 layers of filtration, extract 50 grams of liquid solution. Heat treatment. Radiant stone, crush and filter. Purify and extract all impurities, grind into granular powder. Mix with hop solution, add a small amount of energy to mix well. Blood of the mountains. Alchemy in the sorcerer world was a kind of magical chemical reaction. Different from the one on Earth, every step of operation and every kind of chemical reaction involved all kinds of magic particles. Magic and chemistry fused together, forming a completely unique method of alchemy. The solution that Grimm had spent so much effort to create was worth more than 30,000 magic crystals per 100 grams. Their purpose was to recreate the drop of Jaredin's origin blood that Grimm had stored in his mind. Jaredin, a rank 4 elemental magus of the Magus Association, had an affinity with the light element. After his origin blood was analyzed by Grimm on the spot, it was broken down into countless bits of data and stored in Grimm's mind. Now, Grimm wanted to borrow the AI chip's powerful replication ability and use these magi resources to recreate the drop of blood. Even though he had the data and the AI chip was powerful enough, it was still extremely difficult to replicate the origin blood of a rank 4 elemental magus. The most difficult part was the choice of the blood. After more than half a year of repeated experiments and constant screening, Grimm finally had a good result. When the milky white solution finally floated in front of him, a trace of excitement appeared on Grimm's face. AI chip, perform the final analysis on the finished product. Beep. Comprehensive analysis has begun. Solution is a high-purity light elemental polymer. A solution's activity is in line with expectations. Energy characteristics are in line with expectations. Energy density has decreased slightly, lower than expected by 3%. Radiation intensity is slightly higher, but still within a reasonable range. Dense aura of the law of energy, estimated to contain 76% of the power of the blood. One by one, the test results filled Grimm's mind, but he ignored all of them and looked directly at the final result. The solution contains the might of the law of light, and can contain 76% of the elemental might of the sample. In order to form an independent and complete energy circuit, estimated to produce 7,200 grams. Requesting host to name the solution. Sun's water. Beep. The new solution, Sun's water, has been named and is being produced in batches. Estimated time of completion, 72 hours 34 minutes 58 seconds. The first drop of Sun's water was the most difficult to produce. Once it was completed, the Tower Genie would be able to complete the subsequent processing. Chapter 1279. Heart of the Ice Dragon, a rank 4 material. This was the heart that the Frost Dragon, Nax, had preserved before he had decided to alter his soul. It had to be said that Nax had preserved the parts he had taken from his body with great care. This could be seen from the ice material used to seal the heart, as well as the way he had used it. They were all high-grade goods. As a result of Nax's actions, Grimm had unquestionably obtained a higher quality rank 4 magic material. It could only be a magic material. If a dragon tablet like the Heart of the Ice Dragon fell into the hands of a high-ranked metallurgist, there was a high chance that it could be made into a treasure like the Heart of Ice, which could add frost damage and deep freeze effects to the user's attack. If it fell into the hands of a puppet master, it could be used as a high-grade ice material for a high-ranked construct puppet or himself. It could be used as a source of power in battle. Apart from that, it could also be installed into the bodies of mutated beasts or magic beasts, giving the Magus an abnormally powerful magic slave. As for Grimm, after some calculations by the AI chip, he felt that it would be more worth it to sacrifice the Heart of the Ice Dragon as a rank 4 material to nourish his astral beast bloodline. At his current level, Grimm had already displayed his advantages to the extreme. He had already strengthened everything that could be strengthened. From now on, the growth of his strength had also entered a period of stagnation. The only things that could effectively increase his strength were his spiritual force, his soul, and his bloodline talents. Of these, his spiritual force relied on continuous deep meditation every day. Although the effects were not great, it was still improving slowly. Deep meditation, which had shown immediate results in the past, now required 1 or 2 months of effort to see a trace of improvement. However, with the help of the Book of Darkness, Grimm could rely on continuous reading outside of meditation to increase his spiritual force. In this aspect, his rate of improvement was undoubtedly tens of times that of ordinary rank 4 magi. The improvement of his soul was something that could only be chanced upon. According to the AI chip's calculations, Grimm could only gather enough laws of fire and use the method provided by the Flame Monarch to refine them into his own law of fire. The moment the law of fire was ignited would be the moment he advanced to rank 5, and it would also be the moment his soul would evolve once more. Apart from that, there was no other way. As for the third bloodline talent, there was no shortcut to its improvement. It could only be improved by continuously devouring the flesh and blood of high-level creatures that were rich in the aura of laws. Those wild astral beasts spent their entire lives roaming the boundless star sea, looking for every plane and world they could lay their hands on. Their only purpose in breaking into the plane world was to devour flesh and blood, plunder souls, and then absorb the plane source that was lost from the plane world. However, in essence, the astral beasts were still devouring the fragmented dimensional laws. The law fragments, which were viewed as deadly poison by ordinary creatures, were top-notch delicacies that star beasts yearned for even in their dreams. Not only could they eat, but they could also digest and absorb. They could extract the corresponding nomological power from the broken nomological fragments and transform it into a strange ability that suited them. The reason why astral beasts were so powerful was that they were classified as typical law lifeforms from the moment they reached adulthood. In terms of life level and soul level, they were far superior to most dimensional lifeforms. Therefore, if Grimm wanted to improve his astral beast bloodline and make the chaotic body derived from the astral beast bloodline stronger, he had to find some high-value and nutritious flesh to nourish himself. The heart of the ice dragon was undoubtedly in line with this. The blood sacrifice ceremony he prepared for the feathered serpent egg last time was not used, so it was extremely appropriate to use it on the heart of the ice dragon. However, just as Grimm was carefully preparing the special items needed for the blood sacrifice ceremony in the secret room of his residence, an urgent message from the outside world forced him to stop what he was doing and retreat from the secret room. The message was from Amelia. With Gargamel and Amelia's understanding of Grimm, they naturally knew that he hated outside interference the most when he was in seclusion. Amelia chose this time to send an urgent message through a special channel, which undoubtedly meant that something important had happened in the outside world that Grimm had to personally deal with. Thus, as soon as Grimm read the message, a trace of sharpness flashed across his calm face. Conflict broke out at the border. The conflict escalated. The Randner family began to increase their troops. The border city of Amman has fallen into enemy hands. The Crimson Grand Duke Antoine has fallen. The Randner family. Grimm could not help but ponder. That was a powerful Magus family with a grade 4 witch, Clara. Ever since he advanced to grade 4, his relationship with Clara could be considered passable. Although they did not have a close relationship, seeing that they were both grade 4 forces, both sides still maintained a trace of restraint and tolerance. In the past 100 years, the Crimson family's expansion had deliberately avoided the Randner family's territory, and they did not even touch its subsidiary forces. Under such circumstances, the other party suddenly launched an attack. Even if Grimm did not have any evidence or information, he could smell the scent of a conspiracy. It seemed that the stimulation from the Horton Sorcerer Academy was quite strong, even forcing them to step out from behind the scenes and have the courage to fight against the Crimson family. Moreover, these fellows had a Crimson Grand Duke in their hands. This was obviously to provoke the Crimson family's anger. Ever since the appearance of the Crimson Kingdom, this huge human kingdom, there had been 3 kings. However, there were still only 5 Crimson Grand Dukes that had been publicly conferred, and they represented the 5 subsidiary forces of the Crimson family. Hence, these Crimson Grand Dukes were only ordinary human nobles and did not amount to much in the Crimson family. However, to outsiders, they represented the Crimson family's face and dignity. Since the other party had detained a Crimson Grand Duke, it was obvious that they had this in mind. Even if the Crimson family could not stay out of this matter and pretend to be deaf and mute, they still left some leeway and did not completely fall out with them. Otherwise, they would be able to capture a Crimson Rank 2 Magus much more effectively than the Crimson Grand Duke. What was Clara trying to do? Did she want to be used by the few old fellows in the association and become a sharp blade to deal with the Crimson family and myself? Didn't they feel that it was a little too late to make a move now? Grimm made endless guesses as he strode towards the teleportation room. Since these enemies did not intend to let him live in seclusion, it was time for the Crimson family to retaliate. He would use the fiercest and wildest flames to warn these ambitious and scheming people that he, Grimm, was not someone these clowns could provoke. The small city of Amman. In an obscure border town in the southwest of the Alovis region. The fire had not completely extinguished, and billowing smoke filled the air above the small city, dyeing the sky gray. The originally simple and quiet small city was now dead silent. All the doors and windows on both sides of the streets were tightly shut. Countless gazes filled with doubt and fear shot out from the gaps of the doors and windows, secretly sizing up the strange army that passed through the streets of the small city. This was the Magus army that belonged to the Randner family. Many strong and sturdy acolytes rode on tall magic colts, their bodies covered in thick armor with strange runes. They patrolled the streets while coldly scanning the residences on both sides of the street. They would occasionally rush into the residences and chase the residents and merchants into the streets, making them kneel like slaves on both sides of the street. Anyone who dared to oppose or resist would be executed on the spot. Corpses nailed to the walls and beams were the only outcome for those who resisted. They were searching for the crimson nobles and crimson sorcerers who had escaped into the small city. All the suspects were sent to the dungeon in the city lord's mansion to be locked up. In the sky, magi who were riding on giant double-headed eagles were circling in the sky, closely monitoring and guarding the small city. Half a mile outside the city, a large number of sorcerers from the Ranner family were entering and exiting an exquisite noble's manor. It was obvious that they had treated this place as their core stronghold. The main body of the manor was a 3-story wooden building. At this moment, it was tightly guarded by many wizard beasts and sorcerer guards. Second floor. In a room that was tightly guarded, Antonel angrily put down the wooden window and retracted his peeping gaze. He anxiously paced back and forth in the room. Wizard Sterling, who was reclining on the sofa and quietly reading a spell book, could not help but chuckle. "Grand Duke, don't be so anxious. Since things have gotten to this point, it is no longer something we can stop and control." Antonel, who was pacing, suddenly stopped and listened to the movements in the corridor outside. He then muttered in dissatisfaction, "You're quite open-minded, but I can't. This time, we've fallen into the hands of the Ranner family. I don't know how the family will react. Once war breaks out." The Crimson family and the Ranner family were famous Grade 4 factions in the central continent, and the Crimson family was the only superfamily in the continent. Under such circumstances, if war broke out between the two sides, the terrible consequences would be unimaginable. Even with his qualifications and status as the Grand Duke of the Crimson family, he could not bear such a heavy burden. As a wizard consultant hired by Antonel, Sterling was obviously more knowledgeable than his employer. He calmly replied, "What, Grand Duke? Do you still think that this war was caused by our mistake? Is there any other reason?" "Hee." Sterling chuckled in a low voice. "You really think too highly of yourself and me. To tell you the truth, even if you and I were to join forces, we would not have the qualifications to start such a war between sorcerers. This is a war between sorcerers, not a territorial war in the secular world. The main body of this war is not you and me, but—" At this point, Sterling closed his mouth. His gaze passed through the walls and the manor and cast towards the northeast. Chapter 1280. A black four-wheeled carriage slowly drove into the Black Rose Manor. The wooden wheels of the carriage rolled over the fine gray pebbles, producing a clear rustling sound. After passing through a 100-meter-long gravel path and turning past a circular fountain that had already dried up, the carriage slowly stopped in front of the main 3-story building. More than 10 people dressed in either gray, white or black robes were already waiting by the stone steps, bowing to the beautiful young woman who got out of the carriage. This was a beautiful woman with outstanding looks and an impressive figure. Her pale blonde hair made her face look as round and translucent as ivory. Below her slightly prominent nose, her deep purple lips flickered with a bewitching luster. Her eyes that were as beautiful as cat's eye reflected a gorgeous luster under the light, appearing unusually deep and eye-catching. As a rank 3 spirit warlock of the Ranner family, she did not drape her robes. Instead, she wore a pure black evening gown like a noble lady. The 2 snow-white lumps in front of her chest were extremely glaring, and an exquisite chest flower inlaid with fine diamonds was pinned at the top. White embroidered silk gloves were held in her hands, and her fingers that were as fair as onion tubes seemed so delicate and delicate. "Welcome, Marilyn. Lady Mona." "Welcome, welcome." Hearing the other party's uneven welcome speech, the beautiful young woman straightened her body and swept her gaze across everyone before landing on the small building behind them. She released a large amount of spiritual force, and in an instant, everything in the small building, as well as the interior of the Black Rose Manor, entered her mind. The beautiful young woman could not help but frown slightly. However, this action of frowning and sighing was so charming and moving when it was done by her. The tens of low-ranked magi present, regardless of gender, could not help but secretly swallow their saliva. Once again, they experienced the feeling of their lips being parched and their hearts being shaken. A few rank 1 magi even forced themselves to lower their heads and use magic to protect their mind. Only then did they resist the terrifying urge to rush over and kneel in front of her to pledge their loyalty. Why are the facilities here so crude? That Grand Duke can't have such bad taste, can he? The young, beautiful woman couldn't help but complain after looking around. Can't you change to a better base? Do you want me to spend the night in such a crude place? Hearing the woman's question, the leader of the rank 2 magi took a step forward and replied with his head lowered, "My lady, choosing this place was not our idea. It was Lord Jialuo's decision." Jialuo. Jialuo. It's that bastard again. Can't he just let me have a good time? He complained angrily. Marilyn? Meng Na walked into the building with light steps. Many sorcerers from various families crowded around him like stars surrounding the moon. After taking their seats in the hall on the first floor of the small building, Marilyn Mandelson sat down. Meng Na finally asked, "Where's Jialu? Shouldn't he be overseeing things here?" The leader of the group stood up. Sir Jialuo was originally here, but 2 days ago, he suddenly received orders from the family headquarters, and he left with all the dripping blood pike troops. Which troops are left guarding this place? Ever since we entered the Alobis region, we've been constantly ambushed by the Crimson Magi. The Harpist troops are currently facing off against the Crimson family's magical army 100 miles to the east. The Toy Box troops are attacking Los Hen City from the southeast. That place is guarded by the Crimson family's wizard pagoda, and it'll be difficult to take it down in a short period of time. The Rock Dragon troops have been sent to the north. I heard that Amelia of the Crimson family has already arrived at Cold Mountain City. Nonsense. Half of these arrangements were personally signed by me. How could I not know? What I'm asking is, what other forces are guarding this damned manor? Only the 2nd Wizard Beast Troop and our 7th Magus team. The other troops are already fighting with the Crimson family's forces. According to the basic strength of the Randner family, a Wizard Beast Troop meant tens of thousands of wizard beasts of various ranks, while a team of Magi meant 15 low-ranked Magi of various rank. To be honest, using tens of thousands of wizard beasts and 15 Magi to guard a lousy manor of a human noble was a waste of strength. However, considering the fact that the Crimson Duke was imprisoned here, this bit of defensive strength was necessary. No matter how glorious and prestigious a human noble was, in the eyes of a magus, he was nothing more than a dog wagging its tail and begging for mercy. Originally, the Randner family would not treat him so seriously. A dog would always be a dog, and would never receive the respect and equal treatment of Magi. However, once the dog's name was added with the word Crimson, even the arrogant Randner family had to treat him seriously, not daring to treat him lightly. After all, within the Crimson family, there were only 5 lackeys with the title of the Crimson Duke. Under such circumstances, the status of the Crimson Duke was even higher than that of a regular Grade 1 Magus, and could be compared to those Grade 2 Magi. Of course, this was only glory and status on the surface. In reality, it was obvious who was more important. The title of the Crimson Duke could be given to anyone, but he was still just a regular person. On the other hand, a Grade 2 Magus was the real deal and possessed strength that normal people could not hope to attain. However, at this moment, the fact that the Randner family had a Crimson Duke in their hands was equivalent to giving the Crimson family a hard slap in the face. The Crimson family would either have to rescue him or capture a high-ranked Magus from the Randner family. Otherwise, they would lose face. And this, to the rising Crimson family, was precisely the most unbearable. Only the wizard beast troops and you? Marilyn asked. Mena could not help but furrow her brows. My lord, there shouldn't be a problem. The Grade 2 Magus in the lead was surprised. It's just a human noble and his Grade 1 Magus consultant. Is this bit of protection not enough? What do you know? This Crimson Duke is nothing in normal times, but at this time when the conflict between the two families is escalating, he represents the Crimson family's face. The other party will definitely send someone to rescue him. Speaking of which, Marilyn? Meng Na was still angry, and she said hatefully, the family's troops have already been spread out in all directions, and are currently fighting with their guards. Of course, they couldn't send a Magus army to attack this place, so they could only send a few elites. I was wondering why those bastards at the headquarters were so kind as to let me stand guard at the back. It turns out that this is the most dangerous place. Do you hear, Marilyn? Meng Na's explanation caused the 15 magi of the Ranner family to feel a little uneasy. However, a few of the Tier 2 sorcerers exuding powerful auras were licking their lips, seemingly excited at the smell of blood. My lord, what do you think? The leading Tier 2 wizard asked in a low voice. Pass down my orders immediately. Mobilize my enchanted garden troops here. Sir, this order seems to conflict with the headquarters deployment. What if the headquarters? My spirit force can only be unleashed to its peak with their help. Those bastards from the headquarters are well aware of this. Just like that, I sent my orders back and had the troops from the Garden of Enchanted Dreams rush here through the night. If those bastards dare to refuse, don't blame me for abandoning everything here. Yes. I'll contact the headquarters right away. Hearing the rank 3 female Magus's cold reply, the male Magus hurriedly bowed his head in acknowledgement, beads of perspiration visible on his forehead. All right, all of you can go make arrangements and rest. Right, send that Magus advisor to the Grand Duke to my room. Let me see if there's any useful information in his mind. Yes. This was a quiet and secluded large valley. The ancient trees in the forest were tall and vigorous, and their huge canopies were like umbrellas that covered a large area of an acre. The surroundings were filled with tall mountains and ravines, and the sounds of birds and insects were endless. Buzz buzz, suddenly, a strange sound came from the sky. Following that, 3 metal eyeballs the size of a human head flew over the sea of trees, leaving faint blue streaks in the air that slowly dissipated. When they neared the valley, one of the metal eyeballs hovered in the air and scanned the surroundings. The remaining 2 eyeballs drilled into the jungle, moving up and down agilely among the ancient tree branches and thorny vines that were like a maze. Beams of light blue light shot in all directions, scanning for any suspicious signs. The small animals in the forest immediately hid in their nests, and the forest that had been filled with birds and insects just a moment ago became deathly silent. All the animals, plants, and insects held their breaths, not daring to show their heads or make any noise. The eyeballs passed through the forest and did not find anything out of the ordinary, so they rose back into the sky. A moment later, the 3 eyeballs gathered together and flew towards the nearby forest in a triangular formation. When the eyeballs completely disappeared from sight, a large group of magi riding magic colts tore through the illusory barrier and revealed themselves. The one leading them was the rank 3 Magus face-splitter Garo, whose face was covered in stitches and looked as if it had been shattered. He was riding on a strange magic colt that was especially tall and ferocious. He tilted his head and looked in the direction the eyeballs had disappeared in, a solemn expression on his face. This demonic colt's appearance was especially ferocious. Its entire body was dark black, and its surface was covered in a layer of strange indigo scales. Its ferocious mouth was filled with sharp, guillotine teeth, and there were even 2 long fangs protruding from the front of its mouth. Chapter 1281. Just as broken-faced Jia Lu was silently staring in the direction where the eyeball had disappeared, an exceptionally muscular man in black armor rode a demonic colt to his side. The two ferocious demonic colts came together, but not only did they not show any signs of intimacy, they even neighed at each other and bent down to make threatening gestures. After all the demonic colts were created using spells. Just from their appearances, one could see the shadows of great earth lions, shadow leopards, unicorns, and many other magical beasts. Due to their complicated origins and chaotic life force, they were almost all males and could not reproduce on their own. They only had a short lifespan of 10 years, and were considered a cheap type of mass-produced wizard beasts. However, being cheap did not mean being weak here. Due to their short lifespans, all the violent factors and battle potential in their bodies had been stimulated to the limit by spells. As a result, they were even wilder and more tyrannical. Broken-faced Jia Lu carried the strange demonic sword on his back. He stretched out his large hand and lightly tapped the demonic colt's head, hissing, "Lower your voice. If you alert the enemy's scouts, I'll roast the two of you and eat you." Although his words were light, there was a terrifying majesty in them that could not be ignored. The two demonic colts immediately lowered their bodies, no longer looking as violent and savage as before. "Boss, do you think our sneak attack will succeed?" The brawny man in black armor was also a physique refinement sorcerer. His muscles were so strong that they almost burst through his black armor. There was also a long scar on his cheek, but it was not removed. Instead, it gave him an increasingly fierce and cruel aura. However, in front of broken-faced Jia Lu, he was as docile as a rabbit, his face full of smiles and fawning. "That's not something you should be concerned about." Broken-faced Jia Lu's cold words made the other party swallow his words, but he immediately reminded him in a low voice, "The Swamp of Sorrows we're raiding this time is their forbidden area. I heard that the giant shiitake mushrooms are grown there." Hearing this, the muscular man in black armor was overjoyed. He stuck out his long, scarlet tongue and licked his dry lips, his face full of excitement. Giant shiitake mushrooms. They were the most popular top-grade resource in the central continent during this period of time. It was said that this special mushroom, which originated from another plane, could effectively enhance a magus physique. On average, high-grade wizards could gain around 1 point, while mid-grade wizards could gain 2 points. As for low-ranking wizards, so far, no low-ranking wizard has ever been lucky enough to obtain such top-notch resources. The black-armored brawny man, who was originally only at the elementary level of grade 3, thought that he would never be able to see such a good item in his lifetime. But who knew that the family's ambush mission this time was to plunder and destroy the Crimson family's secret forbidden area, the Swamp of Sorrows. In that case, if he was lucky, even he, the deputy chief of the Dripping Blood Spear, might be able to obtain some decent spoils of war. At this thought, the black-armored man licked his lips even more frequently. "Be careful, our operation this time might not go smoothly. If you meet those famous fellows from the Crimson family." At this point, broken-faced Jia Luo could not help but narrow his eyes. "Good luck." "Don't worry, I have you here." The black-armored brawny man still did not seem to care. "Leader, you are a peak grade 3 existence. Although the Crimson family has many grade 3 existences, I have never heard of anyone who can compare to you." Broken-faced Jia Luo shook his head sadly. "Rumors can't be trusted. If the rumor is true, how could I have been defeated by that Grim?" When he mentioned Grim's name, Jia Luo almost squeezed it out through his teeth. Although 100 years had passed, he was still brooding over it. That opportunity was probably the closest he had ever been to reaching grade 4. Without the source substance, he could only rely on his innate bloodline to slowly accumulate the energy to advance. The difficulty and risks involved were not something that outsiders could understand. "Leader, don't worry. There aren't many monsters like that legendary fire magus. Perhaps..." Just as the black-armored brawny man was speaking confidently, there was a sudden commotion among the demonic cults scattered throughout the forest. The commotion became more and more intense, and there were signs that a riot was about to happen. "What are you doing? You bastards! Don't you know that we are on an undercover mission? What are you doing?" The black-armored brawny man hurriedly shouted in a low voice. "Insect! Insect! Leader, there are insects!" Hearing the frightened cries of the demonic cult knights, broken-faced Jiao Luo's heart sank. The Dripping Blood Spear team was a team of magi that he had personally formed. All the members had the strength of an official magus. The captains of the team had the basic strength of a Grade 2 magus. As for the captain, he was at the peak of Grade 3, while the vice-captain was at the beginning of Grade 3. With such a powerful troop of demonic cults, they would not panic even if they were thrown into a horde of monsters. Even if they were in a perilous situation, they would not feel the slightest panic or fear. They would use their spears and swords to carve out a path of blood, only stopping when the heads of their enemies were hung by their saddles. Would such a powerful troop of demonic cults be afraid of mere insects? Either the person who said this had lost his mind, or that was not an ordinary insect. Broken-faced Jiao Luo was indeed worthy of being the leader of the Dripping Blood Spear team. An image of a terrifying magus appeared in his mind. Hopefully, it was not this bastard, as he silently prayed. Broken-faced Jiao Luo patted his demonic colt and took the lead, charging towards the area where the commotion was the most intense. The demonic colt relied on the sharp claws on its thick limbs to not only fly on flat ground, but it could also climb steep cliffs and withered ancient trees. After a few leaps, they arrived at the scene. Broken-faced Jiao Luo and the black-armored brawny man's hearts sank. Near the roots of a tall ancient tree, the black soil bulged into piles of half-meter-tall mounds. Then, the soil cracked and countless terrifying black beetles swarmed out. These black beetles were the size of mastiffs, and their shells shone with a terrifying light under the dim forest light. They had hard shells, and on both sides of their bodies were 4 pairs of sharp limbs that shone with a metallic luster. In front of their ferocious heads was a pair of huge insect pincers. Although these black beetles looked inconspicuous, they were extremely difficult to deal with. The toughness of their carapace was enough to withstand ordinary enchanted weapons, and the sharpness of their limbs and pincers were enough to pierce through a 3-finger-thick leather-soft armor. Even the magic armor of the demonic cult knights was emitting a dazzling glow as the black beetles gnawed at it. The surface of the metal was also marked with clear and terrifying scratches. As the swarm of insects appeared too suddenly, they drilled out from the ground where the demonic cult knights were resting. In an instant, 3 members were trapped in a sea of insects. The demonic cult knights at the side could no longer care about the order to remain still. Rune spears pierced out continuously, and each strike was accompanied by a dazzling roar of magic. Those who could become members of the Dripping Blood Spear were all qualified magi. They were protected by magic armor, and the rune spears in their hands could choose different types of elemental attacks according to the characteristics of the enemy's elemental attacks. Facing the black swarm of insects that surged like a tidal wave, they naturally chose fire elemental attacks, which had the largest attack range and the strongest attack power. Unfortunately, these flame spears that could easily destroy all life within a 10-meter radius fell into the swarm of insects, but they could only rely on the sharpness of the spears and the power of the flames to kill a few insects in the center of the attack. As for the other black beetles in the attack range, they were only injured but not killed. They continued to attack the 3 unlucky fellows who were trapped in the sea of insects. Amidst the swarm of insects, the tall black figure kept roaring and exploding with shocking elemental roars, but still could not escape from the siege of the swarm of insects. Trapped in the sea of insects, the demonic cult relied on its thick scales to struggle against the waves of gnawing sounds that made one's teeth ache and legs go weak. Unfortunately, there were too many insects surrounding them, and they had already piled up into a huge mountain of insects. The insects squirmed, and every time the demonic cult knights resisted, a layer of black beetles would fall off the pile. However, no matter how hard they fought, the swarm of insects was still so thick, not giving them the slightest chance to escape. The next wave of beetles that surged out closed in on the majority of the demonic cult knights, looking like they would be wiped out in one fell swoop. Insect Witch Bliss. It was definitely the Insect Witch Bliss. In the entire Crimson family, the only one who could raise insects to this level was the mid-grade 3 Insect Witch Bliss Razor. Go save the 3 of them. Broken-faced Jia Luo pulled out the magic sword on his back, his cold, murky eyes scanning the surroundings of the battlefield. The muscular man in black armor was called Razor. The other party agreed, and urged his devil colt to charge towards the swarm of worms that were still bulging and wriggling. However, just as the Void Raiders were halfway to Razor, face-shattering Jia Luo let out a fierce roar and swung the demonic sword in his hand. 2 invisible threads of energy, invisible to the naked eye, streaked across the sky and instantly beheaded 2 Void Raiders who had just sneaked up on Razor. The threads of energy streaked across the sky, nothing in their path able to stop them. They sliced through the trees and vines as they passed through the seemingly empty void. The shrill cries of giant insects rang out. Immediately afterward, blood splattered everywhere, and 2 strange insect carcasses over 2 meters long crashed through the bushes and fell into the grass. The death of the 2 Grade 2 Void Marauders seemed to start a strange killing spree. The surrounding forest immediately filled with the cries of giant insects. Chapter 1282. The swarm of insects attacked en masse. Almost as soon as the demon cult knights noticed them, the forest had already turned into a sea of insects. Standing in the middle of the forest, one could see the terrifying figures of swarms of insects in every corner. As the wormholes continued to appear, more and more terrifying insects crawled out of the ground and attacked the dripping blood spear troops in a frenzy. In an instant, the entire forest was filled with deafening elemental booms. There were flames, frost, and dazzling halos of poisonous rings exploding everywhere. There were also the bone-chilling sounds of insects gnawing on flesh, as well as the shouts of the demon cult knights as they brandished their spears and sharp swords. What was left were the shrill screams of death. It was not that the demon cult knights had never experienced the torment of a long and painful battle, and it was not that they had never experienced the terrifying test of life and death. However, when millions of beetles fearlessly swarmed in front of you and completely drowned you with their huge numbers, that kind of despair, that kind of torment of millions of beetles gnawing away at your body bit by bit was definitely not something an ordinary person could endure. In just a short 15 minutes, 7 demon cult knights had successively fallen into the swarm of insects, becoming a twisting and struggling human-shaped pile of insects amidst the swarm of insects. The Insect Witch Bliss did not seem to have any intention of showing himself. He remained hidden behind the scenes as he commanded the swarm of insects to attack the demon cult knight. As for the captains and leaders who were individually strong, they were stalled by dozens of strange insects of different shapes and effects. Among them, there was the demonic mantis, Grade 1, which was adept at camouflage and could fly extremely fast with a huge scythe in front of it. There was also the void predator, Grade 2, which could travel through alternate dimensions and attack with the power to cut through space. There was also the slaughterer, Grade 3, which had razor-sharp limbs and a super-dense and tough insect shell. The ones entangled with face-shattering Jia Lu were these terrifying Grade 3 slaughterers. They looked almost the same as the black beetles that wreaked havoc in the forest. However, their bodies were smoother, their insect shells tougher, and their claws sharper. What was more terrifying was that they relied on the 2 large and 2 small pairs of insect wings on their backs to fly at an unimaginable speed. Their sharp claws and fangs coupled with their lightning-fast flying speed also increased the power of their attacks. face-smashing Jia Luo might be able to kill void raiders as easily as chopping melons and vegetables, but when faced with this kind of insect-type monster with its guillotine pincer that could slice enchanted steel as thick as a human waist in two, even he had to be careful. He did not dare to underestimate it. After all, there were as many as 5 slaughterers around him. The slaughterer's individual strength was only at the Tier 3 basic rank. Logically, it should not pose a threat to Jia Lu, who was already at the Tier 3 apex rank. Unfortunately, the way the insects fought was completely different from the Magi, so the threat they posed was much higher. At the very least, wizards wouldn't carry the ridiculous concept of sacrificing their own lives to deal a fatal blow to their opponent, nor would they wholeheartedly trust their battle companions. As a result, even though Jia Lu, who was at the Tier 3 apex rank, had the strength to suppress any of the Tier 3 slaughterers, he was unable to kill them. This was because he did not dare to pay the price to exterminate these insects. The main reason was that the terrifying insect which Bliss was hiding nearby, waiting for him to fight the insects until both sides suffered. From the start of the battle, face-smashing Jia Luo could sense a strange spiritual force hovering above the swarm of insects. It was faintly discernible and mysterious. Upon closer inspection, he discovered that this spiritual force did not seem to be a complete and independent consciousness, but an amalgamation of many tiny insects' consciousnesses. It was this strange characteristic that prevented face-smashing Jia Luo from finding the true hiding place of the insect which Bliss. To put it bluntly, the insect which Bliss might have used some secret technique to attach his consciousness to every individual in the swarm. This way, without his so-called main body, outsiders who wanted to kill him would have to obediently wipe out the entire swarm. The battle between the two sides was tense and intense. As if realizing that even the void plunderers and slaughterers were unable to do anything to face-smashing Jia Lu, the insect which Bliss immediately changed his method of attack. Close to 100 rank 1 demonic mantises gathered from various parts of the forest, surging towards face-smashing Jia Lu, who was perched on top of a ferocious magic colt. The 5 slaughterers and 13 void plunderers gave up on face-smashing Jia Lu, instead targeting the ordinary members of the Dripping Blood Pike unit. The results of this simple change in tactics were astonishing. The powerful attacks of the 5 slaughterers were reflected on the ordinary magic colt knight. Wherever the shadows flashed past, there would definitely be demon colt knights falling off their demon colts with their shields and armors broken. Once they lost the high mobility of their magic colts, the horseless knights wearing black armor immediately became the target of the swarm of insects. No matter how sharp their swords were, no matter how fierce their elemental spells were, they could not stop the terrifying swarm of insects. In the blink of an eye, their bodies were covered by a dense mass of black beetles. From afar, the area they were in had already been submerged by the swarm of insects, and it was almost impossible to see their tall and imposing silhouettes. Kacha, 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 strange gnawing sounds that made one's legs feel weak and teeth numb rang out continuously. The Magi Knights who were bitten by the swarm of insects had no chance of escaping the sea of insect. They could only struggle and resist with all their might, feeling the waves of intense pain on their bodies. Elemental shields were crushed, black armors were bitten open, and countless smaller insects burrowed into the armors. Some even burrowed into their bodies, digging in between their flesh and bones as they frantically gnawed away. Amidst these terrifying sounds, they silently experienced their flesh, bones, tendons, and organs being gnawed away by the insects. Not everyone had the chance to experience such a feeling of despair. Most Magi Knights who fell into the swarm of insects would be driven mad by this terrifying feeling, and would self-destruct in despair when there was no hope of escaping. Therefore, after the battle reached its climax, there would be a loud roar from time to time in the turbulent sea of insects, accompanied by countless stinking insect blood and fragmented insect corpses. As for the Night Wizard's corpse, not even a scrap could be found. After all, Magi Knights could not compare to official magi. To a certain extent, they were actually just a group of sorcerer apprentices who had mastered elemental powers. They relied on the magic armor on their bodies, the magic spears and sharp swords in their hands, as well as special training and training methods to have the battle power comparable to official magi. However, the consequence of being mass-produced was that they did not have the profound knowledge reserves of official magi, nor did they have the variety of spells that official magi had, and they did not have all kinds of strange life-saving methods. Such a magi army was naturally invincible when it came to killing the natives of ordinary plains, and it greatly made up for the lack of official magi. However, once they encountered such a terrifying enemy, the chances of them escaping were infinitely close to zero. Fortunately, they were also mass-produced, and it would not be as painful to lose them as official magi. After all, there were so many in the Magus world who did not have enough talent and potential and could not advance to become an official Magus. If they were willing to walk on this special path of being modified and strengthened, they would be able to enjoy the same treatment as official magi to a certain extent. This was actually the main reason why so many magi armies could appear. This was a remote forest that was only 30 miles away from the Swamp of Sorrows. It was also a hidden stronghold where Broken Face Gallo had led the Dripping Blood Spear team to launch an attack. It was a pity that their movements were somehow discovered by the Crimson family, and they were unsurprisingly surrounded by the powerful Crimson Magi, the insect Lich Bliss. Using the strength of a single person to surround and kill a powerful Magus army from the Randner family. Only a few powerful Magi could do such a thing. After resisting for an hour and seeing that they were outnumbered, Broken Face Gallo finally gave the order to retreat. Out of the 300 magic cult knights, only 70 managed to successfully retreat from the forest. This included the two leaders, Broken Face Gallo and the black-armored man Razor, as well as a dozen or so rank 2 knight captains. This kind of loss could already be considered a crushing defeat. However, since the Crimson family had discovered their presence, how could they let them leave so easily? Just as they left the forest, the sky above the night squad was covered by a huge shadow. The giant floating ship, Visero, had already blocked their path. Dong dong dong. Following a series of tremors, battle magic machines up to 3 meters tall fell from the sky. Only when they were less than 10 meters above the ground did they ignite the buffering rockets beneath their bodies. Like steel gods of war, they smashed open shallow pits on the ground. Then, they crawled out amidst the creaking sounds of metal and aimed their pitch-black muzzles at the group of defeated soldiers. Those who kneel with their hands behind their heads will not be killed. Those who kneel with their hands behind their heads will not be killed. Those who resist will be killed without mercy. Loud mechanical sounds echoed in the sky above the battlefield. The magic cannons on the chests, shoulders, and hands of the battle magic machines began to charge rapidly. Countless rays of blue light began to converge inside the cannons, and the strange whistling sound of energy was like faint thunder, breathtaking to the hearts of people. In the sky, at the bottom of the floating ship, a magic cannon that extended out also began to charge silently. The gathered magic energy was compressed into a huge ball of blue light inside the cannon's muzzle. The strength of the energy within was simply frightening. Chapter 1283. Broken-faced Jia Luo's expression changed, and he decided to turn around and return to the forest. Unfortunately, behind him, the black swarm of insects surged out like a tide and quickly gathered together. They bulged and condensed into the figure of a strange magus that was tens of meters tall. 5 slaughterers, more than 10 void raiders, and nearly 100 demonic mantises dove into this strange black figure like tired birds returning to the forest. They successfully merged into the swarm of Insect which Bisley, this insect which Bliss, who had a terrifying reputation even in the central continent, finally appeared in front of broken-faced Jia Luo with the power of the swarm of insects. Tens of thousands of beetles, scorpions, and other insects squeezed together, forming the hideous and terrifying form of insect which Bliss. As the tall figure strode forward, beetles kept falling to the ground. However, they quickly caught up with the group and merged back into the body of the insect which, with a shocking number of insect which Bliss appeared and blocked Jia Luo's path of retreat. They were ambushed, and they were being attacked from the front and back. There was no need for further discussion. The black-armored Raymond roared and swung his greatsword forward. "Charge with me!" After saying that, he led all the demon cult knights towards the Devil Machine Legion, who were waiting in formation. The stitches on broken-faced Jia Luo's face began to twist like a centipede. He could clearly see that there was already a terrifying death trap in front of him. Even if he personally led a team to break through the Devil Mechanical Legion's firepower, he would not be able to escape unscathed, let alone Raymond, who was far weaker than him. Raymond did this to help him block the Devil Mechanical Legion from the front, giving him a chance to escape from the insect which at the back. After all, staying here meant that he would be attacked from both the front and the back, and it was obvious that the Devil Mechanical Legion was more powerful. At this point, if he wanted to escape, he would have to make some sacrifices. Broken-faced Jia Luo turned around and urged his devil colt to charge towards the insect which Bliss, who was baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. In the next moment, the entire battlefield was filled with dazzling energy light. Countless energy rays and magical fireballs rained down on the charging magic cult knights like a storm. Not to be outdone, the opponent activated the elemental protection on his black armor and took out metal javelins from the leather pouch on the side of the saddle. He lit up the magic arrays on them with elemental power and threw them at the Magic Machine Legion. The attacks from both sides crossed each other in midair, and in the next second, they simultaneously bloomed on the other side's formation. Deafening booms, earth-shattering elemental waves, as well as flesh and severed limbs flying in all directions. The entire battlefield was immediately plunged into a reign of terror. The moment he turned around, face-smashing Jia Lu had already foreseen what would happen next. That was why he did not have the intention to look back even when the mountains were collapsing and the elements were wreaking havoc behind him. Instead, he focused all of his attention on the gigantic worm that was winding its way towards him. The ferocious demon sword hummed softly in his hand, and a powerful aura and coercion were mixed together. It was like an invisible iron wall that pressed against his opponent. The surging powerful force spread in all directions through the invisible force field. Within 30 meters of his body, even the basic laws of the plane were directly rewritten by the overbearing force. Large and small rocks and mud particles floated up as if they had lost the force of gravity. Face-shattering Jia Lu's body also left the back of the demonic colt and slowly rose into the air, closing in on the insect from midair. As for the demon colt, it was the exact opposite. Its entire body seemed to have been crushed by a huge mountain. Its spine suddenly collapsed, and flesh and blood splattered everywhere. It did not even have the time to scream before it was gently stepped on by broken-faced Jia Luo and turned into a meat paste. His powerful physical strength was condensed to the limit. Even without using any witchcraft, broken-faced Jia Luo could still fly in the air. At this moment, gravity was no longer a strange law that could not be seen or touched. It had become a strange power that could be manipulated and changed at will. Within the range of Jia Luo's power, the law of gravity could no longer be as effective as before. That was why all sorts of strange phenomena that violated the law of gravity appeared. Broken-faced Jia Luo poured all of his strength into the demon sword. As he exhaled and shouted, a thick black sword aura shot out and hit the body of the huge worm-man that was striding towards him. Splatter, splatter, worm carcasses fell from the sky like rain. The thick sword aura directly opened up a wound in the center of the huge worm-man's body. From the front, one could even see the dark, gloomy, and dead forest behind the worm-man. The huge worm man looked down at his chest that had been cut open. He raised his head and suddenly opened his mouth to scream. No one would have thought that the worm man could open his mouth so wide that countless black beetles would swarm out of it. Like a black torrent, the front of the swarm of worms quickly collided with the small force field outside broken-faced Jia Luo's body. A formless yet terrifying power was evenly distributed on the protective force field. Any living being that came into contact with the force field would instantly be crushed by the strange force. The bug tide kept surging in and dying out. However, before they died out, they exerted an extremely heavy pressure on the shade-faced Jia Lu. Broken-faced Jia Luo's floating figure was blocked. No matter how much he urged his strength, he could not move even half a step forward in front of the swarm of worms. ****. Don't even think of stopping me. Once again roaring at the sky, broken-faced Jia Luo waved the demon's sword in his hand frantically. Every time he flashed, a huge and terrifying wound would appear on the body of the worm man. In the blink of an eye, more than a quarter of the worm man's body had been worn down by broken-faced Jia Luo. However, Worm Witch Bliss was not a piece of meat that would take a beating without retaliating. Its huge body wriggled and twisted frantically, doing its best to heal the wounds on its body. With a casual wave of his hand, a spear made of pure beetles materialized in his bloated right arm. Whoosh! The worm man made a throwing gesture, and the insect's spear turned into a black light that instantly appeared in front of broken-faced Jia Luo. The spear was half a meter thick, and as it flew towards broken-faced Jia Luo, more than half of the beetles on its surface had been killed by the terrifying radiation. As the spear flew, it peeled off and rapidly thinned. By the time it reached Jia Luo, the spear was only as thick as a goose egg. However, the beetles that formed the spear all had powerful auras, and were clearly not ordinary individuals. The black centipede-like lines on broken-faced Jia Luo's face twisted, and a silver star embedded in his cheek suddenly flew out, colliding with the black spear. The silver star did not look big, but it contained an incomparably powerful and violent power. The black spear instantly disintegrated. However, just as broken-faced Jia Luo let his guard down, the broken fragments of the spear suddenly transformed into 2 Grade 3 slaughterers, sliding past him from the left and right. In the instant that they crossed each other, their guillotine-like pincers had already brushed against Jia Luo's tall and straight body, creating many dazzling sparks. A few deep scratches instantly appeared on the black leather armor, revealing the strange, pitch-black skin that flickered with a dark golden luster. Even though broken-faced Jia Luo's zombie body did not fear any poison, it also had an extremely strong resistance to elemental spells. But against the frightening physical destructive power of the slaughterers, his skin and flesh were still lacerated, and visible wounds appeared. This kind of insect transformation was simply too inconceivable. As such, Jia Luo was caught off guard, and did not manage to kill the 2 slaughterers in time. After the insects escaped the range of Jia Luo's force field, their elytra wings immediately shook violently, intending to escape with all their might. "How dare you!" Thoroughly enraged by the other party's attack, broken-faced Jia Luo roared and kicked forward with his right foot. A transparent energy ripple appeared. He made use of this little bit of recoil to quickly retreat, and instantly brought the 2 alien insects into his attack range. A black light flashed in the air, and a thread of energy as thin as silk flew out lightly, streaking across the body of one of the slaughterers. In the next second, the energy exploded, and the beginner Grade 3 slaughterer exploded into a splatter of blood. The other Grade 3 slaughterer disappeared without a trace under the full force of its 4 pairs of elytra wings, escaping with its life. Not far away, the tall bugman that was striding forward let out a sharp hiss, as if in intense pain from the destruction of the Grade 3 slaughterer. However, it quickly returned to normal. 2 scarlet balls of light lit up at the place where the worm heads were squirming. It stared at broken-faced Jia Luo from afar and hissed, You dared to destroy a grade 3 insect servant of mine. I'll make it up to you with your life." After saying this, the bugman stopped talking. Black light flashed in its hands, condensing one black spear after another. It threw them at broken-faced Jia Luo frantically. Against these supercondensed insect spears, broken-faced Jia Luo could no longer block them with force field radiation. All he could do was swing his magic sword, using the sharp threads of energy to blow them up in the air one by one. The insect spears could not get close, so they lost the element of surprise in their attack. This way, no matter how many insects swarmed over, they would not be able to harm Jia Luo's body easily. After fighting with the insect which for so long, broken-faced Jia Luo had finally figured out the other party's attack pattern. The other party was not adept at melee attacks. Instead, it preferred to control the insect swarm to attack its enemies. Originally, with the insect witch's special ability, it could add poison, paralysis, curses, and other strange effects to the insect swarm's attack. Unfortunately, these methods that were effective against living creatures were useless against Jia Luo's zombie body. In terms of strength, the insect witch's attack skills and methods were indeed unimaginable and impossible to guard against. If its opponent was not a peak grade 3 broken-faced Jia Luo, but an ordinary grade 3 magus, the battle would have been over long ago. However, the longer the battle went on, the more calm broken-faced Jia Luo became. As long as he could calm down and fight steadily, and grind down the few grade 3 insect servants of the insect which Bliss, the threat that Bliss posed to him would be greatly reduced. At that time, he could launch a fierce counterattack. Even if he could not kill the other party, he could still kill more than half of the insect swarm, causing it to flee with heavy injuries. Unfortunately, this was not a fair and just duel, but a magus battlefield where life and death could be decided in an instant. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.